Hello and welcome back to Zen in Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series. What if female Deku was Golden Tyrant? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Random Bullshit 9 on Wattpad. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now, let's dive into the story. The world burned beneath a sky split by fury. A storm unlike any other swallowed the horizon, lightning dancing like serpents across blackened clouds, torrential winds howling with a fury that the mountains bear. The ocean roared and twisted into maelstrom, and the land itself trembled beneath the weight of monsters beyond comprehension. At the heart of the storm, descending like a living apocalypse, was Izumi, the Golden Tyrant, the storm incarnate, the eldest of the three Alpha Titans. Towering above all, her immense serpentine form was wrapped in golden, radiant scales that shimmered with destructive energy. From her back unfurled vast wings, blotting out the sun, and her three draconic heads snapped and snarled with coordinated malice. Each head bore a crown of jagged horns and eyes that blazed with hatred, intelligent, calculating, and cruel. She descended upon Antarctica like a falling star, the icy landscape shattering beneath her talons. Electricity crackled across her wings and danced along her forked tongues, scorching the ground with each breath. Her roar, a cacophony of three tones, shrill and deep, furious and mocking, echoed across the planet. The cry of extinction. The earth answered. From the churning waters, Gajiraa emerged, a mountain of flesh and scales, primal and regal. His dorsal plates glowed with searing blue light, pulsing rhythmically with power barely contained. The Alpha Titan of balance, protector of the natural order, had come to answer the call. His bellow shattered glaciers and summoned tremors. His eyes locked onto Izumi's center head, unblinking, ancient fury rising within him. High above, wings of silk and light parted the storm. Mothra, the eternal guardian, descended like a falling leaf, radiant and ethereal. Her bioluminescent wings shimmered in defiance of the chaos, leaving trails of divine energy in her wake. She chirped, a melodic yet mournful cry, filled with determination, and circled Gojira protectively. The ground shook anew. Charging across the frozen wasteland came Anguirus, spines bristling, his reptilian form low to the earth. With a rumbling growl, he joined his alpha, bashing his plated hide against a frozen cliff to dislodge the snow. His eyes never left Izumi. He knew this battle could only end in death. And finally, the wind turned colder still, freezing midair. From the fog rolled the ice titan, Shimo, pale and elegant, every step leaving behind crystallized ruin. Her breath turned the air into knives, and her serpentine tail cracked with icy tendrils. She flared her frilled neck, and a shriek of ice ripped from her throat, harmonizing with the rising crescendo of war. Four titans stood against one. Yet the world feared Izumi the most. The Golden Tyrant didn't wait. Her wings flared, and she surged forward, the sky itself bending around her. The middle head loosed a beam of gravity lightning, a swirling torrent of golden devastation, which carved a trench through the snow and rock. Gajiraa countered with his atomic breath, blue meeting gold, the air splitting apart as the two beams collided in a cataclysmic blast that vaporized ice for miles. Anguirus leapt, crashing into Izumi's flank with his armored shell, but her left head twisted midair and seized him in its jaws, lifting him like a ragdoll. She hurled him across the battlefield, smashing him through jagged mountains of ancient ice. He roared defiantly even as BLD sprayed across the snow. Mothra dove from above, her wings slicing like celestial blades. She weaved through Izumi's strikes, slashing at her wings and eyes, blinding the right head momentarily with radiant spores. But Izumi shrieked, and a pulse of raw gravitational force exploded outward from her body, sending Mothra spiraling away in a trail of golden sparks. Shimo struck next, opening her maw and exhaling a beam of absolute zero frost, engulfing Izumi's torso and left wing. The Golden Tyrant shrieked in fury, ice crystallizing over her scales. For a moment, it seemed like she could be contained. But her hearts thundered. Lightning surged. The ice exploded outward as she roared with all three heads, unleashing another storm of gravity beams in every direction. The sheer force knocked Shimo down, skidding across the glacial battlefield with a gaping wound across her chest. Then Izumi turned back to Gojira. She flew at him, talons forward, head snapping. They clashed with the force of titans and gods. Gojira reared up and slammed his claws into her chest, teeth sinking into her left neck. The right head retaliated, blasting his side with golden lightning, causing him to roar in agony. They tumbled across the ice in a blur of claws, wings, beams, and BLD. The battle stretched on for hours, each moment a world-ending event. Mountains collapsed. Oceans boiled. The sky cracked and bled light. And still, Izumi fought. Even against all odds, she raged. Her hatred for humanity, her longing to erase all traces of their existence, fueled her beyond reason. Every breath she drew, every strike she landed, brought the planet closer to its end. But the Titans had not come to die. They had come to stop her. The battlefield was hell incarnate. Steam hissed from shattered glaciers. The snow no longer fell, it evaporated, caught in the ceaseless backdraft of titanic power. Jagged icebergs floated adrift in the boiling waters off the Antarctic coast, their edges glowing from the residual heat of energy beams and lightning. The once pristine continent had been transformed into a war-torn wasteland of fractured earth and sky. Izumi, the Golden Tyrant, stood amidst it all, bloodied, scorched, but unbowed. Her three heads snarled and writhed independently, each with its own mind, its own malice. Her wings beat with cyclonic force, hurling debris and storm winds across the battlefield. Gojira surged forward again, wounded but unrelenting, his spines flaring with energy. He slammed into her like a living avalanche, claws tearing across golden armor, jaws latching onto her left shoulder. She shrieked in rage, all three heads lashing him with blasts of gravitational lightning, forcing him back. It was then that Anguirus returned. His roar was weaker than before, pained and hoarse. His hide was torn in multiple places, BLD seeping between his armored plates. But he charged anyway, as he always had, his heart unshaken. The loyal vanguard. The warrior who knew no retreat. He hurled himself beneath Izumi as she reared up to launch another attack, slamming his spiked shell into her chest with seismic force. She stumbled, momentarily unbalanced. Seizing the chance, Anguirus climbed up her side like a living battering ram, biting into the base of her right neck, tearing flesh and gold scale. The right head shrieked in pain and fury, its eyes blazing. Izumi's tail whipped up with surgical precision, coiling around Anguirus' torso. Before he could react, she lifted him, the entire weight of his massive form hoisted into the air. There was a moment of stillness. Even Gojira paused, sensing what was coming. The three heads turned toward Anguirus. Then, with merciless brutality, they tore him apart. The sound was indescribable, bone, sinew, and scale ripping as one. BLD rained in geysers across the frozen ground. Izumi hurled what remained of Anguirus' twitching form into a glacier wall with such force that the entire structure collapsed, entombing his body beneath thousands of tons of ice. A howl rose from Gojira, not just rage, but grief. Anguirus had fought beside him for centuries. They had bled together, triumphed together. Now he was gone. Izumi roared in triumph, a chorus of three war cries, exalting the kill. Her wings unfurled, lightning crackling between her horns, body gleaming with BLD and power. She turned her attention to Shimo, whose frost had slowed the Golden Tyrant earlier. She would pay next. Shimo stood upon a cliff, her breath curling into the air like tendrils of smoke. Her eyes narrowed. She had watched Anguirus fall. Her long body coiled back, and she unleashed a second beam of absolute zero ice, aimed directly at Izumi's wings. But Izumi had learned. The left and right heads intercepted the beam, countering with spiraling streams of golden lightning. The two forces met midair, and for a moment, neither won. Then Izumi's center head surged forward, and a third beam joined the fray. The balance tipped. The lightning cut through the frost like a blade, and in an instant, Shimo was engulfed in the blast. She screeched as her body was flung backward, her sides scorched and ripped open. She landed hard, sliding across the ice, a trail of steam and blood marking her path. Her frill lay torn. Her legs buckled. The cold had failed. Izumi stalked toward her, each thunderous step cracking the earth. She raised her wings high, all three heads charging another volley. She would eliminate the Ice Titan here and now, and then deal with Mothra and Gajiraa. But Gojira did not let her. With a bellow that split the skies, he tackled her from the side, driving her back. Their massive forms collided once more, carving deep trenches into the earth. His atomic breath ignited again, scorching her left neck, searing exposed flesh. She screamed, one head flailing, another biting, the third charging a return strike. Above them the air shimmered. Mothra returned. From high above, her wings glowed with celestial fury. She dove, releasing a cascade of divine spores that bathed the battlefield in radiant fire. The golden energy struck Izumi's back and wings, burning through layers of scale and flesh. She roared and thrashed, her attention divided for the first time. Gajiraa pressed the advantage. His claws raked across her chest, then he bit into her central neck, dragging her down with all his weight. The Titans toppled, slamming into a glacier shelf that began to crack beneath them. Still, Izumi would not fall. Even burned. Even bleeding. Even with one wing damaged and a neck wounded. She rose again, her eyes filled with incandescent hate. She struck Gajiraa with all three heads at once, smashing him back. Her wings flared. She would end this world before she yielded. But the tides of battle were shifting. One Titan lay dead. One lay wounded. But two still fought, and Gajiraa would not let her reign begin anew. The war would not end today. But it would turn. As Izumi rose into the storm-racked sky, the clouds twisted and lightning forked violently across the heavens. The final part of the battle loomed. The clouds churned like a wounded sea above the shattered Antarctic battlefield. Lightning lanced through the storm, illuminating the carnage, melted glaciers, mountains rent asunder, and the frozen grave of a fallen Titan. The air reeked of scorched ozone, blood, and ash. Izumi, the Golden Tyrant, stood supreme in the chaos. Her three heads twisted in furious harmony, each snarling and shrieking in challenge, blood-streaked jaws glimmering with divine fury. Her body smoked from Mothra's radiant spores, and patches of her golden scales were torn, but her posture remained defiant. None of it mattered. She was an alpha, and even wounded she refused to bow. Across the ruined ice plains, Shimo limped into position. The great serpent of frost dragged her tail behind her, a massive gash carved deep into her side. Her frill crackled faintly with frostbite and blood. She snarled low, summoning what strength remained in her trembling limbs. Mothra circled above, glowing dimly. Her wings no longer shone with the brilliance they had at the start of the battle. One was tattered. Her elegant body bore claw marks and burn scars. But her flight was steady, and her resolve unwavering. And Gajiraa, the king of the monsters, rose again from a pit of broken ice. His dorsal spines glowed with pulsing energy, and smoke hissed from his jaws. A long cut across his abdomen oozed radioactive blood, but his stance was that of a ruler defending his domain. The three remaining defenders had not fallen. And now they would end this. High above, Monarch satellites recorded the impossible convergence. Deep within the ice, the tectonic plates trembled. An ancient geothermal vein opened, a hollow vast enough to swallow entire cities, long theorized to be a hidden Titan nesting ground. Gajiraa felt it. He roared to the heavens, calling to Mothra and Shimo. The plan was made. The trap had opened. Now they had to force Izumi into it. Izumi sensed the shift, the change in pressure, the roar from beneath the crust. Her central head hissed in suspicion. The others scanned the ground, and the glimmer of sudden realization flashed in their shared mind. They were trying to bury her. She would not be buried. With a screech that made the mountains quake, Izumi took to the skies, even with one wing crippled. Her form blurred with speed, winds whipping down in cyclones, lightning arching between her horns. But Mothra intercepted. She dove from the clouds, her damaged wings leaving a trail of divine spores in her wake. Izumi roared in defiance and lunged upward to snap at her, but Mothra twirled midair, slashing with her glowing wing across Izumi's left head. Izumi screamed. Shimo struck next. Despite her wounds, she lunged from the cliffs and fired a beam of pure cold at Izumi's back, freezing her wings mid-flap. The blast forced Izumi down, clipping her altitude. She landed with an earth-shattering impact, sending glaciers flying in every direction. Mothra landed in front of her, wings extended, emitting pulses of radiant light. Izumi snarled, all three heads converging to blast her apart. But it was a distraction. Behind her, Gojira began to charge the earth. He roared and slammed his tail into the exposed ice sheet above the geothermal sinkhole. The ground shattered, revealing the yawning maw of the earth itself, a chasm large enough to swallow Titan's whole. Steam billowed up, thick and boiling. It was time. The trap was sprung. Izumi whipped around, catching sight of the tomb, too late. Shimo barreled into her side, jaws snapping onto her wounded wing. Mothra struck from above, slamming her bioluminescent body down on Izumi's shoulders. And from the front, Gojira charged, his dorsal plates glowing, breath surging. Together they pushed. The ground crumbled beneath them. Izumi shrieked, thrashing wildly. Her claws raked Shimo's chest, her right head bit into Mothra's wing, her tail slammed into Gojira's flank, but they did not yield. They forced her toward the abyss. Each step shattered the glacier further. Each roar reverberated across the ruined world. Izumi dug her claws into the ice, all three heads roaring in desperation and wrath. Her lightning crackled, arcing through the air in wild, uncontrolled fury. But the trio of titans held firm. One final push. Gojira unleashed his atomic breath, blasting into Izumi's chest. Mothra bathed her in radiant fire, searing her flailing wings. Shimo fired a final cryogenic beam, locking her legs in ice. And with a thunderous crack, the ice collapsed. Izumi fell, her roars trailing as she plunged into the abyss, her three heads shrieking in defiance. In rage and hate. Lightning sparked wildly from within the chasm, illuminating her form as she tumbled into the Earth's hollow WMB. She vanished into darkness. Gojira collapsed to one knee. The light on his spines dimmed. Mothra fluttered downward, wings barely able to keep her afloat. Shimo slithered to the edge, trembling, her body marred by BLD and frost. Now came the final step. Shimo raised her frill. The temperature dropped instantly, moisture freezing midair. A storm of white gathered at the chasm's rim. Her mouth opened, and she released her largest cryogenic beam yet, blanketing the tomb in absolute zero. The walls of the abyss iced over, expanding with every second, the opening narrowing. Mothra summoned the last of her radiant spores to seal the top, casting a shimmering, crystal lattice of divine energy across the surface. Gojira roared, not in triumph, but in sorrow and warning. They had not killed her, only entombed her. Beneath the miles of ice, Izumi stirred. Even buried in darkness, even entombed in a glacial prison, her body pulsed with raw, dormant power. Her three heads slept uneasily, and her dreams were filled with fire, extinction, and vengeance. Thus began the Age of Silence. Izumi, the Alpha of Storms, would sleep for 253 years, until humanity's arrogance awakened her again, and the final war would begin. Year 2384. The world had changed. Cities now floated in the sky, their lower districts cradled by anti-graviton fields. Artificial intelligence directed global traffic flows, maintained automated defense grids, and monitored weather patterns. Humanity had rebuilt not only its cities, but its spirit. Or so they believed. The hero system, despite a millennium of evolution, still held its iron grip over society. UA had become a global institution. Heroism, now a refined cast of power and media prestige, controlled the gears of civilization. Quirks were no longer chaos. They were economy, law, identity. And all for one, after centuries of war and resurgence, was still alive. His body, rebuilt 100 times through stolen regenerative quirks and experimental biotech, bore little resemblance to the man once known as Shigaraki. He had long shed the name and the face of the monster the world once hunted. Now he was a ghost, a myth, a strategist in the shadows. And once again he was losing. His war, the latest and most devastating resurgence of the villain vanguard, had ground into a stalemate. Despite the power of artificial quirks and armies of biomechanical Nomu, the heroes, bolstered by orbital surveillance and next-gen gene editing, had adapted too quickly. The battlefield had shifted. The era of single combat and ideological conquest was gone. All for One needed a weapon. Not a quirk. Not a soldier. Not a system. He needed a force of nature. He had heard of them in whispers over the decades, reports of unexplained seismic events in the far polar regions, bioelectric surges that ruptured satellites, Arctic tremors with no tectonic cause. And once, buried within an old American server he hijacked in 2371, he found the name, Monarch. The database had been triple-layered, encrypted with alien code, literal dead languages reconstructed by AI as a deterrent. But All for One was nothing if not persistent. It took him 8 years to decrypt the outer shell. What he found inside changed the course of his war. The first file was a visual log. Footage. Faint. Grainy. Dated 2134. It showed a colossal shadow moving beneath the Antarctic ice. Dozens of titanic shapes converging upon a single point, and then a blinding flash of gold and white, followed by seismic readings off the charts. The final note was from a man named Dr. Keed Sarazoa. She sleeps now. Entombed, but not slain. The Golden One. We call her Titanus Izumi. All for One watched the footage again. And again. And again. He smiled beneath his respirator. 1 week later, in a hidden facility carved beneath the ruins of old Muzutafu, All for One summoned his most trusted lieutenants, remnants of the Paranormal Liberation Front and heirs to his secret doctrine. Standing at the center of a holographic map of the world, All for One gestured to the poles. Monarch, he said, voice modulated through cracked speakers, has survived in the shadows longer than any of us. They have studied beings beyond comprehension, creatures predating our quirks, beings of extinction, of ascendance. He paused. There is one that dwarfs all others. He brought up a 3-headed silhouette, golden, winged, towering. Izumi. The room fell silent. Someone whispered, but that's a myth. The Titan War is propaganda. Cold War fairy tales. Wrong, All for One snapped. I've seen the proof. And I've read the protocols. He turned to his advisors, clones, zealots, some quirk-born, some synthetic. I want Monarch infiltrated. Top to bottom. We have 3 years before the next solar eclipse. Their patterns of geothermal flux indicate a thaw. Her tomb may become unstable. We will be ready. And when she rises... He turned back to the hologram, watching as Izumi's image flickered like a flame. She will not be a prison. He tapped his cane once. She will be my sword. 6 months later. Monarch Headquarters, Deep Arctic Zone 02. Access level, Keter. Personnel entry, 43 active agents. Clearance Alpha Black. Deep within the icy plains of Antarctica, a hidden bastion buzzed with tension. Subterranean corridors bristled with seismic monitors and cryogenic field regulators. At the core of it all, the tomb room, a vast dome of machinery encircling a slab of ancient, golden ice. Inside it she slept. Izumi, her form barely visible through the frost. 3 heads curled in on themselves, wings folded like collapsed cathedrals. Her breathing, glacial, seismic, rhythmic. The alarms had not yet begun, but the temperature had risen by 0.4 degrees. Back in the heart of the Pacific, a satellite data relay pinged a strange anomaly. A system failure. A coded virus had entered the relay node. And in an underground lab in Japan, All for One smiled as Izumi's tomb fed him data in real time. She's waking, he murmured. 3 years. 3 years to prepare. 3 years to unleash Armageddon. And this time, there would be no heroes left to stop it. Location: Neo-Kyoto, Japan, all for one's command sanctum. Neo-Kyoto glittered under a low-hanging orange sun. The fusion of steel and glass spiraled into the sky like thorns of progress, an illusion of peace veiling the scars of past wars. From a high mountain hollow overlooking the city, all for one stood motionless in his chamber, a shrine of machines, data coils, and suspended Nomu in cryotanks. The air hummed with nervous electricity. His personal neural interface glowed as a signal flickered into place, hacked directly from a Monarch observation satellite above the Philippine Sea Trench. He stepped toward the projection table, his clawed fingers hovering above it. The image focused. He saw a turbulence beneath the waves. A roiling storm had erupted from nothing. No weather patterns, no seismic precursors. Only a pulse. A challenge. The depths parted as a deafening shockwave shattered the surface. From the abyss, he emerged. Titanus Gojira. His dorsal plates glowed with a deep, oceanic blue. Each step on the ocean floor cracked tectonic boundaries. The very water shimmered away from him, repelled by his aura. His thunderous roar split the sky, a primal declaration that echoed across the globe. The enemy. A pair of airborne figures, spindly yet massive, cut through the darkened clouds like vultures. Red eyes gleamed beneath armor like chitin. The male was sleeker, faster, agile with wicked, blade-like limbs. The female, broader, heavier, brimming with reproductive rage, shrieked into the storm. The Muto pair. All for one narrowed his eyes. They came first, he murmured to himself. Drawn to the old predator. The pretenders to the throne. Gojira let out another roar as the sea around him convulsed. He rose onto the shattered remnants of a long-forgotten oil rig. The male Muto dove first, slicing through the air, talons outstretched. Gojira swatted it midair with a swing of his tail, sending it pinwheeling into the water below. But the female was upon him. She crashed into his chest, digging claws into golden-hardened scales, trying to drive her force down into his spine. Electricity danced around her limbs. Her EMP pulses burst outward, momentarily scrambling the Monarch satellite's feed. All for one grimaced, adjusting the feedback. She's learning, he mused, trying to shut him down. But the ancient king was older. And wiser. Gojira's spines lit up, blue at first, then white-hot. The ocean turned to steam. A deafening whine surged from his core. Atomic breath. It tore into the sky like a spear of the gods. The Muto shrieked, flung from his torso like an insect. The beam followed her as she tumbled, slamming her into the water. Steam hissed. Water exploded upward in a geyser of destruction. Then, the male reappeared. Clever. Swift. He stabbed Gojira from behind, his claws digging between the dorsal plates. Gojira groaned, his body reeling. Even gods bleed, all for one whispered, fascinated. But only the king survives. The female returned, trying to pincer Gojira into SBMSN. She latched onto his leg, dragging him down toward the abyss. Her screech rippled through the storm. But Gojira's response was ancient. His body pulsed with raw radiation. The ocean boiled. A secondary pulse surged from his chest, a nuclear pulse, vaporizing the female's grip. Her limbs disintegrated where they touched his scales. She flailed in agony. Then Gojira turned. He caught her by the throat with his jaws. And crushed. All for one exhaled slowly, watching as the female Muto's body went limp, her last cry fading beneath the waves. The male shrieked in fury, but it was too late. Gojira's tail struck once more. A sonic boom echoed as the creature was swatted out of the sky, and then incinerated midair by another beam of atomic fire. The sea returned to silence. Storm clouds parted. Only the king remained. Gojira roared, not in fury, not in victory, but in warning. A sound older than memory. Older than quirks. A sound that said, I am awake. In his sanctum, all for one clenched his fist. So, you still live. There was no joy in his voice, only calculation. He had wanted to awaken Izumi to tip the balance of power. But now, seeing Gojira rise first, the game had changed. The old king still stands, which means the tomb remains sealed. He turned to one of his engineers. Increase pressure on the monarch infiltration cells. I want direct access to their tomb room schematics within 6 months. No excuses. The projection faded, but the echo of Gojira's roar lingered in the chamber. A king had risen, but all for one would crown a queen. And when Izumi returned, the world would burn. Year 2384, 3 days after Gojira's awakening. Location: Monarch Global Command, undisclosed Arctic facility. Sirens wailed low, like the rumbling growl of some ancient beast echoing through the steel bones of the Monarch Arctic Command. The nerve center of the organization, hidden beneath 10 miles of glacial ice and carved into the very crust of the Earth, lit up in hues of amber and red as seismic alarms trilled in every corridor. Technicians darted between control panels. Holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing real-time bioacoustic readings, seismic anomalies, and energy pulses across the globe. At the heart of it all, Commander Lin Ryu stood rigid before the primary observation table, arms crossed, her steel-gray eyes scanning the map of Titanus signatures coming online one by one. Report, she ordered, voice sharp. Dr. Katsuro Yaman, Monarch's chief exobiologist and historian of Titanus behavior, approached, tablets clutched under one arm. It started the moment Gojira surfaced, he said, pointing at the seismic charts. We picked up a massive bioacoustic resonance from the Philippine Trench, category Alpha, unmistakable. But now, he tapped the table. One by one, points on the global map lit up in crimson pulses. The others are waking up. Ryu's brow furrowed. How many? Dr. Yamane looked grim. All of them. Yunnan Rainforest, China, site. Titanus Mosura Biodome, designation, Moth 01. Thick jungle mist rolled over ancient temple ruins, now partially encased in a massive containment dome hidden within the deepest stretch of the Yunnan Rainforest. Massive ventilation shafts hissed as internal systems struggled to adapt to the sudden increase in temperature and humidity. Inside, deep within a glowing silken chamber, the larval form of Mothra stirred for the first time in over a century. Monarch surveillance cameras buzzed as the creature, curled in coils of bioluminescent silk, began to uncurl. Its long antennae twitched, sensing something. A call. A memory. A king's roar echoing through the world's ley lines. Technicians screamed as systems shorted out. Power grids flickered. The creature let out a high-frequency cry, more mournful than hostile, an instinctive call across time and space. Skull Island, site. Titanus Kong habitat, designation, Kong 09. The last bastion of untamed wilderness on the planet shuddered under a low tremor. Massive trees cracked and groaned as a monstrous figure emerged from the cliffside jungle, brushing aside centuries-old foliage like grass. Towering, powerful, and radiating a raw, primal intelligence, Titanus Kong emerged from his lair, a scarred, weathered monolith of strength. His amber eyes narrowed, lifting his head to the clouds. He heard it too. The balance was shifting, and with it, the ancient war he thought long buried. Roden's Nest, Isla de la Muerte, Mexico, site. Roden 06. The volcano shook. Lava trembled inside its chamber as if recoiling from something ancient and angry. Inside the heart of the volcano, Roden shifted. The magma-slick wings twitched. His burning eye flicked open, glowing gold. He screeched. 1,000 bats exploded from the mountainside as the volcanic tremor gave way to steam vents bursting across the jungle. The fire demon of the skies was stirring, and Monarch's regional agents were already evacuating nearby towns, but they knew there wasn't enough time. Nothing could stop a Titan once it remembered its purpose. Monarch Arctic Command, Global Titanus Observation Hub. We're picking up activity in at least 5 dormant Titanus containment zones, said Lieutenant Carver, flipping through updates as the control room flickered red. Mothra's readings are escalating. Roden's caldera is approaching eruption-level seismicity. Kong, He's moved out of his central habitat. That hasn't happened in 200 years. Commander Ryu slammed her hand on the table. What about Titanus Shimo? Silence. Dr. Yamane hesitated. We lost track of her during the early 2200s after the Kaiju sealing accords were signed. Her cryogenic tomb in the Russian steppe was found. Breached. No signs of her since. Ryu cursed under her breath. Then we're blind. She turned to the room. All units, begin Protocol Echo. I want all Monarch field branches running acoustic sweeps, energy pattern triangulations, and thermal scans of their sectors. If Shimo is out there, we find her. A younger agent in the back, pale with fear, raised his hand. Commander, what does this all mean? Why are they waking up now? Ryu's voice dropped. They're responding to the call of the Alpha. But Gajiraa is the Alpha. Yamane looked down, his voice grim. Which means something ancient is stirring again. Something they swore to keep buried. Commander Ryu stared at the central map, and at the icy glow at the bottom of the world. Antarctica. The tomb. Still dormant. For now. Elsewhere, Kyoto, Japan, All for One's command sanctum. All for One watched the same map, now mirrored in his lair. His network of infiltrators within Monarch was feeding him every report, every seismic spike, every whisper of awakening. The old beasts were moving. He smiled. Good, he murmured. Very good. His mind raced with calculations, timelines, and contingencies. He had what he needed. The key to final war was within reach. But there was one lock left to open. His eyes settled on a red icon pulsing at the South Pole. Titanus Izumi. His queen. His apocalypse. And the world's extinction. Date, January 3, 2385. Location, Monarch Arctic Command, Perimeter Black Site, Aegis Bastion. A blizzard howled across the jagged expanse of Antarctica. Shards of razor-sharp ice battered against alloyed carbon steel bunkers as though nature itself was clawing at Monarch's defenses. The tomb lay silent beneath 1,000 meters of reinforced permafrost and quantum carbon alloy, a monolithic sarcophagus built to withstand a nuclear onslaught and the wrath of something far more ancient. Titanus Izumi. Inside Aegis Bastion, the mood was not one of calm observation. It was one of grim calculation. Monarch's Global Command had officially raised Protocol Aegis Black, the highest level of security enacted since the War of Silence in 2097. Teams of elite guards, Titan-specialized tacticians, and cryotech engineers rotated on 6-hour shifts, keeping constant vigil over the sensors and readings surrounding the tomb. They told the public that the tomb was a deep earth pressure vent research site. Only a few knew the truth, and fewer still knew that the silence was not natural. Beneath the surface, Observation Chamber Sigma-01. Agent Tenma Igarashi adjusted the micro-hollow display embedded in his ocular lens. The schematics flickered across his vision as he walked through the dimly lit corridor carved deep into the glacial crust. Reinforced fusion piping hissed low steam across the hallway, masking his biometric transmission frequency. He passed 2 guards. They nodded. He nodded back. Inside, the observation chamber overlooking the central control ring of the tomb was active, barely. 3 engineers monitored radiation levels, tectonic vibrations, and temperature gradients. All were within acceptable levels, but trending upward. Just slightly. Tenma uploaded a microdrone, no larger than a snowflake, from a fold of synthetic skin beneath his wrist. The drone flitted upward, invisible, embedding itself in the rotating internal lens system monitoring the tomb's sarcophagus. As it synced with the internal data core, Tenma whispered into his encrypted neural implant. Payload Sigma-6 ready. Transmitting now. Kyoto, All for One's Sanctum, Underground Facility Sigma Prime. 1,200 kilometers below Mount Fuji. The data arrived in bursts, decrypted by the moment it entered the core systems surrounding All for One's throne room. Floating in a zero-gravity chamber of neurological wires and sensory interfaces, the ancient villain smiled beneath his armored respirator. The hologram before him was a 3-dimensional construct of the tomb, every vent, cryo core, power capacitor, emergency failsafe, seismic restraint grid, and command override node rendered in crystalline detail. He could see her, sleeping, buried beneath alloy, ice, and ignorance. "Izumi," he whispered like a father greeting his firstborn after centuries apart. From the surrounding chamber, his inner circle emerged. Dr. Ujiko, reborn through neural cloning decades ago, spoke first. "With these schematics, we could disrupt the tomb's geothermal regulator. It would take time, but enough subtle pressure over the next 2 years would destabilize her prison." All for One shook his head. "No, not yet. We move too soon, and Gojira will sense her before we are ready. We must awaken her when the earth is ripe with chaos, when the others are scattered." His gloved hand clenched slowly. "We will let Monarch watch as the world teeters. Then, we release their apocalypse." Monarch Arctic Command, Perimeter Bastion Gamma. Commanders rotated security codes every 4 hours. Biometric access required BLD matching and secondary pulse authentication. Still, the infiltration ran deeper than they knew. 2 more agents were embedded, one as a low-tier comms technician, the other a member of the elite tomb response unit. They operated under deep psychological conditioning, ready to act when triggered. Monarch believed it was tightening the grip on the most dangerous creature ever born. But the enemy had already stepped inside the walls. Monarch Global HQ, Geneva, Earth Council Alliance Sector. Commander Lin Ryu stared at the decrypted intelligence files from Arctic Command. Patterns were emerging. "Every Alpha Titan is awake or stirring," she muttered to Dr. Yamane. He nodded grimly. "All except one." She tapped the tomb. "I want a full reinspection of the tomb. I want graviton readings, thermal spikes, subatomic quakes logged every 15 seconds. No static gaps. And I want a new AI security review of all internal personnel." Yamane blinked. "Commander, you think someone's already?" "I think," she interrupted, "we may already be at war. And we just haven't realized it yet." Elsewhere, deep Earth Hollow Nexus, beneath the Indian Ocean. A pulse echoed. Primal. From the farthest reaches of the Earth's hollow network. Shimo opened her eyes in the dark. Far from Monarch. Far from Gojira. Far from even Kong. She heard it. A whisper in the currents of magma and stone. A queen was dreaming. And soon, the world would wake her up. Year, 2385, month, April. Location, Neo-Kyoto, Japan, all for one sanctuary. The chamber was dark, humming with low-frequency resonance as All for One stood at the center of a holographic projection depicting the world. Countless red dots pulsed across the map, each representing a Titanus-class being. But his focus remained on a single glowing point etched into the Antarctic ice sheet. Izumi, the golden cataclysm, the forgotten alpha, and soon, the last god to walk again. The schematic stolen from Monarch had revealed more than their engineers ever dared admit. Beneath the tomb's elegant design and self-sustaining energy field, there were flaws. Not structural, but systemic, biological, energetic, environmental. Izumi wasn't just sleeping. She was listening. All for One had seen it in the neural fluctuations. Micropulses of radiation being absorbed and rerouted. Minute shifts in her position too precise to be tectonic. Even in slumber, her body fed off the world around her like a battery. All she needed was a breach. And he would give her one. Phase 1. Destabilization. Activate suboperation. Winter Fong, All for One ordered. His inner circle, nestled in the sunken auditorium of his lair, responded at once. Suboperation Winter Fong had one purpose: erode the systems powering the tomb without triggering Monarch's automated alerts. Every 4 hours, one of the infiltrators in Monarch's Arctic installation transmitted an energy feedback pulse, disguised as standard venting activity, through the cryoregulation pylons embedded in the ice walls of the tomb. These pulses, too minor to register as threats, slowly desynchronized the rhythm of the quantum lock systems keeping Izumi's containment grid stable. It was like dripping water onto a glacier, imperceptible, until the crack spiderwebbed. Phase 2. distract and divide. Simultaneously, All for One began the media disruption campaign. A series of leaks were sent anonymously to lower-ranking Monarch personnel through secure but untraceable deepnet channels. These included doctored internal documents suggesting that Monarch's higher command had intentionally covered up the deaths of dozens of staff lost during earlier Titan engagements, especially the Mudo skirmishes. Riots in minor outposts flared. 3 Monarch scientists were found dead, claimed as suicides. And one crucial lab in Cairo, tasked with monitoring subterranean Titan migration paths, was burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances. Each incident forced Monarch to reallocate resources, reassign elite staff, and fall into a tightening spiral of internal investigations. Meanwhile, no one noticed the Arctic tomb's cryogrid dropped to 97% efficiency. Phase 3. The Icebreaker. April 21, 2385. A subtle quake rippled through the Arctic, magnitude 3.1. Not enough to raise alarms. Monarch logged it as a microglacial shift, but All for One knew better. Within hours of the tremor, he activated the second stage of Sabotage, an artificial energy surge sent through a long-dormant geothermal vein, reactivated by one of his Titan-born bioweapons, Hiveworm Omega, a parasitic tunnel dweller genetically engineered from Titanus Chernomura remnants. It burrowed into the veins below the Arctic shelf and injected a bioelectric frequency calibrated to disrupt hibernating Titanus tissue. In other words, it was whispering to Izumi. Arctic Tomb, Observation Station Aegis Bastion. Senior Technician Rika Anguirus stared at the readout for Tomb Grid Node 47. Commander? I'm seeing a 0.3-degree increase in the north side mantle interface, she said. Could be a system calibration error, but I'm flagging it. Commander Nash frowned. Run a diagnostic. If it spikes to 1.0, we notify Geneva. Yes, sir. She never got the chance. A cold gust hissed through the venting behind her, odd for a sealed room. Something was wrong. From deeper below, within the tomb itself, a pulse echoed. Faint. A heartbeat. Near Kyoto, All for One's lair. She's beginning to stir, All for One said softly, watching the ripples on his holographic interface. Ujiko turned. Sir, at this rate she could be at 40% active metabolism by the end of next year. Perhaps earlier, if the tremor sequences continue. All for One nodded. Then we prepare the world for war. Monarch will continue to flail. The heroes will look to their nations. And by the time they realize what walks beneath their feet. He looked again at Izumi's golden form, still cocooned in the ice. She will remind them who once ruled the earth. Elsewhere, Skull Island, Hollow Earth Bridge. Titanus Kong roared across the sea of trees, feeling the seismic tremor roll beneath the bedrock. His eyes narrowed. Something old was moving again. Something he had fought once. The earth remembered her. And so did he. Yunnan Rainforest, Mothra's cocoon. Moisture shimmered across the pale silk of the ancient cocoon as it pulsed once, faintly. Mothra's larval form had been dreaming of the past, of battles fought beside gods and against monsters. But now, in her slumber, she felt the tomb's heat rising. She twitched, stirred, and sang a note none could hear, except the other titans. Geneva, Monarch Global Council. The tomb's efficiency has dropped below 96.5%, Commander Lin Ryu announced. All eyes in the room turned to her. Worry bloomed in their expressions. We're increasing automated defense protocols and deploying Sentinel-class drones across the perimeter, she said, then paused. And beginning phase preparation for final war. Silence. And then the room erupted into motion. Because Monarch had always feared what slept in the tomb. But now, the tomb was breathing back. Year, 2385, month, June. Location, Neo-Kyoto, Japan, All for One sanctuary. Darkness swelled across the control room of All for One subterranean fortress, broken only by the faint glow of projected Titan telemetry. His hand hovered just above the haptic controls, absorbing the world's pulse in real time. 2 new red signatures blinked into focus. Tiamat. Scylla. Both ancient, both unpredictable, and both slumbering within fractured ecosystems, just waiting for a nudge. All for One's lips curled into a smile behind his respirator. For years, Monarch had considered them isolated threats. Guardians, perhaps. Or at worst, territory-bound kaiju with primitive instincts. What Monarch had never understood was how easily instincts could be manipulated. 4 weeks earlier, the Black Reef, South China Sea. Deep beneath the warm tides of the Philippine Trench, Titanus Tiamat slept amid a nest of calcified coral and volcanic glass. Her serpentine body curled through miles of submerged ravines like an endless dragon of the abyss. Red bioluminescence flickered through her translucent underscales, casting a hellish glow into the water. She was the sea's wrath, the storm that could not be charted, and All for One wanted her furious. Through layers of misdirection, he hired a paramilitary contractor known as Crimson Covenant, a rogue war-for-hire collective made of ex-special forces, defectors, and the children of a world broken by titans. Their assignment was simple: attack a sleeping god. Operation Leviathan Spark, Philippine Trench, June 3, 2385. They came in stealth suits, hydrojets, and sea mines packed with electromagnetic pulse cores, disguised as deep-sea research drones. 25 divers. 10 unmanned carriers. 3 submarines. Tiamat stirred at first. Then she screamed. The ocean boiled as she tore free from the seabed, whipping her mass into a whirling spiral of fins, tentacles, and armored scale plates. The drones shattered instantly. 2 subs imploded from the pressure wave. The Covenant team never stood a chance, but they had succeeded. Tiamat was enraged, and she surged toward the nearest landmass, Luzon. June 4, 2385, Manila, Philippines. No one had expected it. The air raid sirens hadn't sounded in over 2 decades. Tiamat rose from the sea like a god of old, a tidal wave accompanying her ascent. Her roar split the skies as typhoon-force winds circled around her writhing form. Buildings collapsed. Cargo ships snapped like twigs. Entire neighborhoods vanished beneath the flood. Over 80,000 dead in the first 24 hours. Monarch scrambled aircraft from Okinawa and Australia, but they arrived only to find wreckage. Tiamat had already vanished, retreating back into the sea as if the slaughter had been nothing but a storm passing through. It was a warning, and across the globe, it was answered. June 6, 2385, Etna Subterranean Lair, Sicily, Italy. Titanus Scylla, the spider kraken of the old Mediterranean, had long remained dormant beneath the crustal faults near Mount Etna. Monarch had long monitored her seismic signatures, erratic but docile, until the Covenant struck again. They used thermal destabilizers, dropped through hidden sinkholes deep into her volcanic nest, tiny devices that mimicked the energy signal of rival titans. Threats. Competition. Scylla, ancient and territorial, reacted as she had for millennia. With annihilation. She erupted from the side of Mount Etna in a shower of molten stone and superheated air. Her legs, crustacean-hard and doubly fast, tore apart mountain roads and villages as she rampaged through Sicily toward the sea. Catania burned. Palermo fell into chaos. Over 40,000 casualties within 2 days. Monarch Crisis Summit, Geneva. Dr. Elsbeth Navarro slammed her fists against the conference table. This isn't natural. These titans don't just attack without provocation, someone is stirring them. No proof, General Takashi growled. No signals, no transmissions, no seismic anomalies. This could just be a bad year. Navarro narrowed her eyes. 2 in the span of 72 hours? On opposite sides of the world. Ryu Lin, director of Monarch, rose slowly. I want every inactive titan watched. Double every security outpost. Initiate fallback plans for the tomb in Antarctica. A quiet stillness followed. None of them said it, but all of them felt it. Izumi was stirring, and the others were beginning to sense it. Near Kyoto, All for One's lair. He watched the unfolding footage with cold amusement. Tiamat's whirlwinds. Scylla's seismic destruction. His voice rasped through the empty room, recorded for posterity. It's chaos, yes. But chaos breeds division. And division will crack the cage. The Titans awaken, but not to Monarch's call. To mine. He turned to a hologram of the tomb. And when the ice breaks, she will finish what they started. All for one turned to Ujiko. Now, he said, begin locating Behemoth. I want the next symphony to thunder across the Amazon. Year, 2385, month, July. Monarch Command Center, Geneva. The silence of the conference room felt suffocating, every seat filled with officials and Monarch personnel that seemed to shrink under the weight of the Titan's rage. The damage in the Philippines had been catastrophic, and the eruption of Scylla's fury in Italy had set the entire southern Mediterranean on edge. The global news had shifted from being overwhelmed by politics and civil unrest to giant monsters decimating everything in their path. Dr. Elsbeth Navarro stood at the head of the table, her face illuminated by the holographic projections of Tiamat and Scylla's devastation. The reality is clear, she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of centuries of research. This is no longer a matter of containment. The Titans are being provoked. Someone is deliberately stirring them. Raya Lin, the director of Monarch, was pacing in front of the massive digital display, glancing at the live updates streaming in from all over the world. We're now facing simultaneous threats across multiple continents. The other Titans may follow if we don't control the situation. General Takashi, the Monarch liaison from Japan's defense force, gritted his teeth. Every nation has their own agenda. We're not united. The Chinese will never agree to a collective defense strategy. The Russians have been withdrawing from global alliances for the past decade. The United States? He paused, his fingers massaging his temple. We don't know where they stand after the collapse of their government. Monarch was a force of immense power and influence, but even it had limits, especially when dealing with the global political instability that had followed in the wake of so many Titans' awakenings over the years. And now, Tiamat and Scylla had confirmed one thing. The Titans were awakening faster than Monarch could react. Elsbeth Navarro was silent for a moment, then fixed her gaze on the group, as if measuring their resolve. We need to reach out. We need a diplomatic solution. Her words cut through the tension like a blade. July 10, 2385, Global Diplomatic Effort. A world summit had been called. The UN had backed Monarch's request for a global summit. Nations had sent their top diplomats, strategists, and military leaders to a secure location in Geneva to discuss a unified approach to the new Titan threat. But in a room of hundreds, each nation spoke with a different agenda, some hoping for control of the Titans, others for a seat at the table when it came to their destruction. The words that rang out the loudest were self-preservation and sovereignty, and Monarch's task was clear: how to bring nations together to agree on a collective action without forcing their hand. As the summit continued, Navarro found herself in private conversations with the Chinese envoy, the Russian Federation's representative, and several UN officials. Every conversation ended the same way: monetary incentives, military demps, and national interests were the only things on the table. But when it came to cooperation in dealing with the Titans, it was like trying to glue together broken glass. Monarch's approach is commendable, but we do not trust their predictions, the Russian envoy, Sergei Mikhailov, stated bluntly, his face betraying little emotion. You speak of defense, but we've seen too many times that these monsters cannot be controlled. And now, you want to unite us under your banner. Raya Lin had been expecting this, but it didn't make it any easier to swallow. The Russian Federation had been pulling back from most international agreements for over a decade, and with the constant instability in Eastern Europe, they were becoming more isolationist. Their focus on nuclear deterrence was one of their primary strategies. He tried to remain calm. We don't have the luxury of time. Your best bet is cooperation. The Titans are responding to a coordinated threat, and we must unite before we face the next catastrophe. Sergei's smile was cold. Prove it, he said before walking away. July 15, 2385, the calm before the storm. In Neo-Kyoto, Japan, a different kind of planning was taking place. All for one, always a step ahead, had been watching the chaos unfold across the globe. He had seen Tiamat's rise, Scylla's fury, and he had been studying the movements of Monarch closely. They were scrambling, running from the inevitable truth. They were not in control. Sitting in his secluded lair, All for One's eyes glowed a pale, sickly yellow as he mulled over his next steps. It was almost time. In 2 years, the world would fall into chaos the likes of which no one had ever seen. But Izumi, the final key, was still in slumber. But once he awoke her, everything would change. His hand rested on the control console, fingers twitching in anticipation. 2 years, he thought to himself, his fingers tapping against the edge of the table. He would need to be patient, but when the time came, no one would be ready. For now, All for One's plan would need subtlety. He had agents infiltrating Monarch's ranks, working their way through the organization's inner echelons. They were gathering intel on Izumi, on her power, on her location, and most importantly, they were waiting for her awakening. But there was more to it than just awakening her. All for One's personal preparations. As All for One sat in the darkened lair, the thought of his next steps formed in his mind. He didn't just need the raw power of a Titan. He needed the loyalty of a Titan. Izumi, when awakened, would need to be manipulated. Her hatred for humanity, her longing to wipe them out, they were the perfect catalyst for his war. He would ensure that she knew who was in control when she awoke. He would be there, standing beside her when she faced the world. July 20th, 2385, a surprising twist. The global summit had reached its final stages when a surprising development occurred. An encrypted transmission was sent to Monarch's top officials. It was a warning. I don't know who you are, but know this, we know everything you're doing. You have 2 years before the Earth is burned down by the Titans. We know your true objective, and your plan will fail. I suggest you stop before it's too late. The message came from an anonymous source, but its implications were clear. Monarch was not the only one who knew about the Titans, and they were not the only ones watching. All for One's smiling anticipation. Across the ocean, in a darkened chamber filled with shadows and projections, All for One's lips curled into a wicked smile as he processed the transmission. It was a warning, but it also meant that someone, somewhere, was aware of his work. And that only meant one thing. His time was fast approaching. Year, 2385, month, August. Neo-Kyoto, Japan, All for One's lair. The dim glow of monitors flickered in the shadows, reflecting off All for One's pale face as he leaned back in his seat. The map of the world sprawled before him in holographic form, with the location of every active Titan marked with pinpoint accuracy. The Titan's movements had become increasingly erratic and unpredictable, but All for One knew they were still just pieces on the board, waiting for the final moment of his plan to unfold. For the time being, however, there was a more immediate matter. 2 of the most destructive and ancient Titans lay dormant, deep within the earth. These Titans, Behemoth and Leviathan, had been slumbering for centuries, but their time to rise had come. All for One had already ensured that his agents infiltrated Monarch's ranks, and with the knowledge gained from them, he had begun laying the groundwork to awaken the 2 remaining Titans who were integral to his strategy. They would act as harbingers of chaos, preparing the world for Izumi's awakening. Through his underground network of agents and Nomu, All for One had procured the necessary resources. He had designed 2 groups of Nomu, powerful biological weapons crafted to awaken Behemoth and Leviathan. These creatures, specially engineered to withstand and control the chaos the Titans would bring, were perfect for the task at hand. With their abilities, they would initiate the awakening of the Titans in a way that would leave the world vulnerable and destabilized. The eastern seaboard of the United States, Behemoth's awakening. It was midnight when the first tremors shook the coastline. In the heart of the eastern seaboard, stretching from New York to Washington, D.C., the ground began to rumble. At first, it was subtle, just a low vibration beneath the earth. But then it escalated, as if the very foundations of the world were cracking open. Behemoth, one of the most ancient Titans known to humanity, lay dormant in a massive subterranean cavern beneath the Appalachian Mountains. The creature's form had been buried for centuries, but the Nomu's infiltration had begun the process of breaking the Titan's bonds. With precision and deadly intent, they triggered a series of sonic pulses designed to rouse the slumbering beast from its eternal rest. From the depths, a massive roar split the air, a sound so powerful that it reverberated across the coastline, rattling windows and sending waves crashing into the shores. The sky above darkened as the earth groaned, the ground splitting apart to reveal the colossal form of Behemoth, an ancient, monstrous creature of immense size, its body covered in layers of armor-like scales. It was a force of nature made flesh. Behemoth's awakening wasn't just physical, it was an expression of sheer, unstoppable chaos. Its gargantuan claws scraped the surface of the earth as it began to rise, tearing through rock and concrete alike. The massive creature's roar shattered the silence of the night, sending a wave of terror rippling across the population. The Nomu who had awakened Behemoth watched from the shadows, knowing they had done their part. They had ensured the Titan's return, and now they would step back into the darkness to let nature take its course. Behemoth's rampage began. It took no time at all for the Titan to start smashing through the densely populated cities along the eastern coast. New York's skyline was reduced to rubble as the beast marched forward, indiscriminately crushing buildings, cars, and infrastructure underfoot. Washington, D.C., once a symbol of human power, now lay under the shadow of a creature that seemed to mock the very concept of civilization. Military forces, once proud and determined, now found themselves helpless. The moment they engaged Behemoth, they realized how powerless they truly were. Conventional weapons bounced off its scales, and even the most advanced artillery seemed like pebbles striking a mountain. Behemoth's massive tail swung through entire city blocks, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. All for one watched this unfold through his network of agents, his lips curling into a twisted smile. This was just the beginning. The awakening of Behemoth would destabilize the United States, weakening their ability to act swiftly when the time came. Monarch would be stretched thin, trying to fight off a creature of such primal destruction. The Aegean and Black Seas, Leviathan's awakening. Across the world, in the vast depths of the Aegean and Black Seas, another Nomu team was completing its mission. Hidden beneath the Mediterranean waters lay the dormant form of Leviathan, a creature of such gargantuan size that its very presence was thought to be an ancient myth. The Nomu tasked with this awakening had infiltrated a covert underwater base located deep beneath the Aegean Sea. The team had been carefully placed here, with a detailed plan to awaken Leviathan. Through the use of advanced sonar technology, they unleashed a powerful signal that reverberated across the ocean floor, shaking the very foundation of the sea. This was the moment Leviathan would rise. The first sign of the awakening came as a surge of bubbles erupted from the depths. The ocean's surface churned, as if the entire sea was being ripped apart from below. Suddenly, with a great force, the water parted in an explosion of waves, and the colossal form of Leviathan emerged from the deep, its massive body dragging up the sea with it. The creature was a horror to behold. Covered in thick, jagged scales that glistened in the pale moonlight, its eyes burning with an ancient fury. Leviathan was the embodiment of the deep sea, a force of nature capable of swallowing entire fleets whole with a single movement. As the Titan emerged, the ocean seemed to quake under its weight, and a tidal wave rolled out from its massive form, sweeping over coastal cities like a biblical flood. In the wake of its awakening, Leviathan's roar echoed across the Aegean and Black Seas, a sound that struck fear into anyone who could hear it. Entire coastlines were consumed by the ensuing flood, buildings and ships torn apart like paper. The cities of Istanbul, Athens, and Alexandria found themselves at the mercy of a force they could neither predict nor control. Leviathan's immense size made it difficult for conventional military forces to even get close to the beast. Fighter jets, ships, and tanks were obliterated in moments, and the once proud naval fleets of Europe and the Middle East stood powerless before the Titan's overwhelming power. The creature's massive tail whipped through the seas, creating whirlpools that sucked entire ships beneath the waves. The coastlines of Europe and Africa were being rewritten by Leviathan's rampage, the foundations of history itself eroded by the might of the Titan. All for one, in the comfort of his lair, watched the destruction unfold through his network of drones and agents. Two Titans now awakened. The world was now in turmoil. Monarch, helpless in the face of such power, would not be able to react fast enough. He had set his plan in motion, and the stage was set for the final phase. But there was still one more Titan to awaken, the true weapon, Izumi. August 15, 2385, Global Panic. With the awakening of Behemoth on the eastern seaboard and Leviathan rising from the depths of the Mediterranean, the world was on the brink of collapse. Monarch was scrambling to mount a defense against two rampaging Titans, but their efforts were futile. Even with the combined forces of the military and scientific communities, they could only hope to contain the damage in isolated pockets. The rest of the world was left to fend for itself. Monarch's leadership was desperate. Communications with international leaders were strained, and the global summit they had worked so hard to establish now seemed like a distant, naive dream. The world was slipping into chaos, and it was only a matter of time before the next wave of destruction would come. All for One strategy. As he watched the world crumble, All for One allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His agents had successfully awakened two of the most ancient Titans, Behemoth and Leviathan. The world was destabilizing, Monarch was on the back foot, and the threat of more Titans awakening was real. But this was just the beginning. Soon, the world would realize that its true nightmare was just around the corner. The final phase of his plan was near, and when Izumi finally awoke, she would not only be a weapon of unimaginable destruction, she would be his weapon. Year: 2387, month, February. Neo-Kyoto, Japan, All for One's lair. All for One stood before a massive holographic projection of the globe, his expression unreadable as he observed the series of events unfolding. The world was on the brink of total collapse, with Titans rampaging across the continents, and Monarch scrambling to contain the chaos. It was a necessary evil. His plan had reached its final stages, and the last piece needed to complete it was in motion. Izumi, the slumbering Titanus, imprisoned within the Arctic tomb for centuries, was the last piece of the puzzle. Once she was awakened, he would hold all the power. Monarch's fall was inevitable, and the heroes, fragile and scattered, would crumble beneath the weight of her awakening. The world would bow to him. But there was one obstacle left, the tomb itself. Monarch, despite being stretched thin with the awakening of multiple Titans, had taken considerable precautions with the Arctic tomb, ensuring that it was heavily guarded by specialized personnel and advanced security measures. All for One had no intention of allowing these barriers to hold him back. He had already orchestrated the fall of the tomb's security from the shadows, ensuring that a private military company, PMC, his hired mercenaries, would infiltrate the tomb and eliminate the last remaining humans guarding the site. His agents had already made contact with the PMC, and by now, the team would be on their way. With a smirk, All for One activated a communication device, dialing into his secure network. He sent a final message to the leader of the PMC. Execute the mission. The tomb must be cleared. Izumi's awakening is inevitable. Do not fail. As he sent the command, All for One turned his gaze toward the map again. He had no intention of simply overseeing the destruction from afar. This was the culmination of years of planning, manipulation, and power-grabbing. He would be there, at the tomb, when Izumi finally opened her eyes. When she would rise. Gojira's roar. Meanwhile, far from All for One's lair, another Titan had become restless. Gojira, who had been steadily patrolling the world's oceans in recent years, felt something stir deep within him. He had been near the Bermuda Triangle when the faintest sensation prickled through his immense senses, a disturbance unlike any other he had encountered. For years, the Titans had been restless, but this felt different. The air was charged with an energy, an urgency that only he, with his ancient instincts, could detect. Gojira's massive form loomed in the dark waters, his fins cutting through the ocean with powerful strokes as his mind instinctively focused on the source of the disturbance. Something was happening in the north, the Arctic. His roar reverberated across the waves, a low, guttural sound filled with primal fury. His immense, nuclear-powered form began to move in the direction of the Arctic tomb. There was something there, a danger. His instincts told him that the tomb was being tampered with. Arctic tomb, inside the facility. Inside the Arctic tomb, Monarch personnel moved in a constant state of heightened alertness. The tomb had been built with one purpose: to contain and neutralize the Titanus Izumi if she ever awoke. For the past 2.5 centuries, this icy vault had stood undisturbed. But that peace was shattering. Monarch's security forces, while formidable, could only do so much against the growing threat of all-for-one's machinations. Unknown to the guards, a well-trained team of mercenaries had infiltrated the perimeter of the tomb. Silent as shadows, the PMC made their way toward the control center, bypassing the tomb's outer defenses with a combination of stealth technology and electronic warfare. The commotion outside was masked by the howling winds of the frozen tundra, but what awaited within would be far deadlier. Inside the tomb's main complex, Commander Caroline Mayer watched the monitors with furrowed brows. Her team had detected something unusual on the sensors, unidentified movements within the tomb's restricted zones. Her orders were clear: the tomb was not to be disturbed. But this was not the usual security breach. She felt it in her gut: something was wrong. A sudden explosion shook the facility, followed by the deafening sound of gunfire and the deep growl of combat. The PMC had breached the inner sanctum of the tomb. "We're under attack." Commander Mayer barked into her comm device, but the transmission was interrupted by a second blast. The tomb's security system was being overrun. The PMC moved in swiftly, their specialized suits and weapons cutting through the Monarch personnel with ruthless efficiency. They were well prepared for this mission, no questions asked. The plan was simple: infiltrate, eliminate any resistance, and neutralize the core personnel. Once they had cleared the tomb, the remaining task was to disable the final systems keeping Izumi dormant. Commander Mayer fought back, trying to rally her men and make a stand, but it was too late. She could see it in their eyes. They knew the tomb would fall. The mercenaries reached the heart of the tomb, where Izumi was sealed deep within the icy chamber. The leader of the PMC raised a hand, signaling for the team to halt. A massive steel door stood between them and the Titanus, the last barrier keeping her imprisoned. As the leader approached, his eyes glinted with a cold, calculating gaze. He knew that breaking into the tomb was only the first step. The next step would be ensuring that Izumi's awakening went according to plan. With a swift motion, the PMC leader activated a device that initiated a countdown. A series of metallic clanking noises echoed throughout the chamber as the door's massive locking mechanism began to disengage. The tomb was opening, and there was no turning back. Monarch's response: the Arctic defense. Back at Monarch's headquarters, in response to the sudden breach, a rapid response team was assembled. But the situation was already beyond their control. Commander Mayer's distress signal had already gone silent, and all communication lines to the tomb were severed. Monarch's leaders scrambled for a solution, but they knew time was running out. "Send everything we have. Activate all defense protocols. The tomb must not fall." Monarch's forces deployed rapidly, but even as they mobilized, it was clear that they were too late. They knew the tomb was not just a facility, it was the last line of defense, both against the Titans and the secrets it held. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the situation had already escalated beyond anyone's control. And the greatest threat, now aware of the tomb's vulnerability, was heading north. Gojira's approach, the tomb's doom. As Gojira tore through the ocean, his nuclear-powered body propelled by instincts older than humanity itself, he felt the disturbance in the air grow stronger. His massive, powerful limbs surged through the water, a dark figure against the backdrop of a storm-laden sky. He was drawn to it, this inexplicable urge, a deep, biological instinct to protect and destroy. It wasn't until the icy winds began to bite at his scales and the freezing waters turned to slush around him that he realized where he was. The tomb was nearby. And it wasn't just a building anymore. It was a sign of something far more dangerous, something he had sensed long ago: Izumi. The tomb. It had been compromised. Someone had opened the vault. Gojira roared into the Arctic air, his voice a mix of rage and foreboding. He would not allow this. He would not let humanity, or anyone, awaken Izumi without consequence. As he neared the Arctic coast, his massive form began to emerge from the ocean, towering over the landscape, the waves crashing beneath his feet. His immense presence seemed to make the very earth tremble in anticipation. And as Gojira made his approach, Monarch's satellites and communication channels began to buzz with activity. The situation was dire. The tomb, the last defense against Izumi's awakening, was about to be overrun. All for One's final move, the Cold War of Titans. From the shadows of his lair in Neo-Kyoto, All for One watched the live feed of the tomb's breach with a smile. His agents were already there, his mercenaries cutting through the last of Monarch's resistance. He had orchestrated the entire chain of events, Izumi's awakening, the chaos that would follow, and now, the inevitable confrontation with Gojira. He had timed it perfectly. Monarch's forces were unprepared. They were already on the back foot, their resources stretched too thin. And now, Izumi was on the brink of being freed from her icy prison. Nothing could stop him now. Nothing but the cold, calculating power of Gojira, who would be the final test. The world would tremble, and Izumi would rise. Year, 2387, month, February. The Arctic tomb, the breach. In the dead of night, beneath the icy wastelands of the Arctic, a deafening series of explosions ruptured the silence. The frozen expanse of the tomb shook with the force of seismic tremors. The explosion had been precisely timed, a signal that All for One's agents were moving forward with their mission. The explosive charges, strategically placed in multiple areas of the tomb, cracked the thick walls and shattered the reinforced steel. The air inside became thick with smoke and debris as the destruction continued to unfold, breaking open the tomb and destabilizing the facility. The tomb, designed to withstand decades of pressure and resistance, was now crumbling under the assault. The frozen barrier that had held Izumi, Titanus-Izumi, in stasis for more than 2 centuries began to fracture, sending echoes of destruction throughout the depths of the vault. All for One watched from his lair, his cold smile widening with satisfaction as the live feed transmitted the chaos unfolding. He had orchestrated it all. The explosions, the destruction, the weakening of the containment field that held the Titanus in place. But what he didn't expect, and what he couldn't have predicted, was the sheer magnitude of what was about to happen. Inside the tomb, a low hum began to resonate from the epicenter of the destruction. The containment fields flickered and sparked. For the first time in centuries, the dormant Titanus began to stir. Izumi's awakening, the fury unleashed. Izumi's eyes snapped open. The ice and snow surrounding her shattered with a violent force as the violent roar of the explosions roused her from her long, ageless slumber. The tomb that had contained her, the one that had imprisoned her, was now broken. The fury that had been building within her for over 200 years surged to the surface with an intensity that no one, be it human or Titan, could have anticipated. Her immense form slowly stirred within the debris, massive claws scratching at the remnants of the steel containment. Her body, coated in thick layers of frost from centuries of dormancy, broke free of the restraints, revealing the terrifying creature that she had become. Her scales shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly glow, her massive tail swishing violently as it snapped the surrounding structures. The tomb was no longer a prison. It had become her battleground. Izumi's massive form rose from the shattered remnants of her containment, a towering figure of fury and power. Her chest heaved as her senses flared, and for the first time in centuries, she was fully aware of her surroundings. The scent of fresh air, the sensation of the frozen ground beneath her feet, the vast expanse of the Arctic wasteland around her, it all rushed to her in an overwhelming tide. But it wasn't the tomb's destruction that caught her attention. It wasn't the shattered walls or the smoke that filled the air. It was the presence of a being that had dared to tamper with her sanctuary. She felt it, a presence at the core of the tomb, just beyond the devastation. The presence of someone who had caused this chaos. All for One. Her fury surged. The roar of Izumi, a challenge to the Alpha. As the air around her crackled with power, Izumi's mouth opened wide, her fangs gleaming in the dim light. Her throat vibrated, and a deep rumbling sound began to grow from within her, building in strength and ferocity. The raw, primal energy in the air seemed to amplify as she prepared to release it. And then she let out a roar. It was not the roar of an animal. It was not even the roar of a titan. It was a challenge, a declaration of depth, of power, of a presence that could not and would not be ignored. The sound reverberated through the air with such force that the ground itself seemed to shake beneath her. The very earth trembled in response to her fury. Izumi's roar was unlike anything the world had ever known. It wasn't merely a cry of awakening, it was a cry of depth. A challenge to anyone who dared approach her, a declaration that she would not be controlled. The sound echoed across the Arctic tundra, reaching across continents and oceans, a cry so powerful it broke through the dense, frozen air. It reached as far as Monarch's headquarters, causing a momentary shake in the walls. It ripped through the communication satellites that orbited the Earth, disrupting the signals. It echoed through the forests of Yunnan, where Mothra's larval form shuddered, sensing the call. It rolled across Skull Island, where Kong's primal instincts flared in response to the roar, his massive form pausing mid-step. It reached the skies above Mexico, where Roden's wings fluttered in a reflexive response. But most importantly, it reached Gojira, who was already moving toward the Arctic tomb. His colossal body shuddered as the sound reached him, his instincts screaming in response. He had heard it before, the challenge of a true alpha. Izumi's roar was a challenge to him. And he knew that nothing in the world, no matter how powerful, would be able to resist it. The world was changing. Izumi's presence was undeniable, her challenge to the Alpha Titan, Gojira, impossible to ignore. She was awake, and as her massive form stood tall amidst the wreckage of the tomb, her eyes locked onto the figure she had sensed earlier. The one responsible for the destruction. All for one. But she did not acknowledge him directly. In fact, she ignored him entirely. His presence, his manipulation, meant nothing to her. The world that had once held her in chains was now nothing more than a blur, fading into irrelevance as her rage built. All for one stood, watching in disbelief as the Titanus, a creature of unimaginable power, seemed completely unaffected by him, her attention only on the world around her. She had not been awakened by him, nor had he called her. She was not his to command. Her eyes narrowed as she set her gaze on the horizon. Her territory, her domain, was vast, wider than any one human, any one titan could understand. And the moment she had broken free, she began to reclaim it. All for one had miscalculated. He had assumed that once Izumi was awakened, he could command her, bend her to his will. But he was no different than the humans who had sought to control her for centuries. He was beneath her. As she let out another roar, even more intense than the first, her massive tail slammed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the icy landscape. The very ground itself seemed to crack under the pressure of her presence. The sky above darkened, the clouds swirling as though reacting to her primal energy. It was not just a declaration of depth, it was a warning to everyone, stay out of her way. The response, Monarch's mobilization. Back at Monarch's headquarters, panic began to ripple through the ranks. The roar of Izumi had been heard around the world, a chilling signal that the Titanus was free and more dangerous than ever. Monarch's leaders scrambled to react. They had never anticipated the level of fury that Izumi would unleash upon her awakening. Her roar was the ultimate signal of challenge, the challenge of a leader. The challenge of a Titanus who had been denied her rightful place as the apex predator of the world. They had only just begun to understand the significance of the situation when the first shockwaves from her roar reached them. All units to the Arctic tomb, immediately, the commander shouted as he rushed through the war room, urgency in his voice. The tomb was no longer just a prison, it was a battlefield. But Monarch's scramble would be in vain. The chaos of Izumi's awakening had already set in motion an irreversible chain of events. Gajiraa was already on his way. The world's titans were moving toward the Arctic. And in the distance, from the shadows of the world, all for one gritted his teeth. He had set this plan in motion, but it was no longer his to control. The Titanus had been awakened by force. And now she was free. February 2387, the Arctic tomb, twilight hours. The air was sharp with frost, a biting cold made ever more bitter by the destruction left in Izumi's wake. The Arctic ice sheet lay cracked and broken, steam rising from the ruptures that vented heat from the long-buried tomb. She stood atop the shattered remains, her towering form outlined against the swirling snow and dim light. Her massive wings unfurled from her back, like curtains of shadow and lightning, her body glowing with streaks of radiant bioluminescent light that surged with each breath. Then the sea parted. The ocean beneath the ice groaned as a massive shape surged upward. Icebergs tilted and shattered as Gajiraa, the ancient Alpha Titan, emerged. His jagged dorsal plates sliced through the water like the fins of a great demon. His thunderous footfalls cracked what little remained of the stable ice, and his eyes burned with recognition and challenge. He had heard her call. Izumi turned, her gaze fixed upon the approaching giant. The ground trembled with every movement as Gajiraa bellowed, his deafening roar echoing across the Arctic. He was not here to protect humanity, not out of loyalty to monarch or vengeance against all for one. He was here because the world had shifted, and a new contender had emerged, and she dared to challenge his throne. They met atop the frozen battlefield. Two godlike forces in physical form, their presence alone causing the sky to swirl and storm. Izumi's clawed feet dug into the ice. Gojira's massive tail swept behind him like a great iron WHP. For a moment, all was silent, a shared breath before the storm. Then they charged. Gajiraa let out another roar and slammed his shoulder into Izumi, sending her sliding across the cracked ice. She twisted mid-motion, wings flaring as her claws carved lines into the glacier. With a scream, she leapt back, her scythe-like arms colliding with Gojira's hide in a storm of sparks. Gajiraa grunted, his thick armor repelling most of her force, but she was fast, unnaturally fast for something of her scale. The fight escalated. Ice shattered. Waves surged. Izumi danced around him, delivering slashes and tail whips that forced Gajiraa onto the defensive. But the king of the monsters was far from helpless. He lunged forward, clamping his jaws down on her shoulder. A spurt of glowing ichor burst from her wound as he threw her into a frozen ridge, burying her under a cascade of ice and snow. Then came the hum. Gojira's dorsal plates lit up with cerulean brilliance, building toward his most devastating weapon. The Arctic wind howled in anticipation. As Izumi burst forth from the rubble, Gajiraa opened his jaws wide and unleashed a torrent of atomic fire. But Izumi was ready. At the last second, she twisted and shot into the air with a sudden surge of kinetic energy. The atomic breath tore through the ice where she had stood, melting it into a boiling crater of glowing blue water. Then, from above, Izumi retaliated. Her wings crackled with energy, surging with gravitational distortion. A low hum built within her core as she extended both arms forward. From her chest and palms, a gravity lightning beam erupted, a focused storm of violet-black energy that spiraled downward and struck Gajiraa square in the back. The force of it was unlike anything he had experienced. He howled in pain as the energy scorched through his scales and knocked him face-first into the frozen shelf. The ice beneath him exploded in a cascade of white and blue as the Arctic sheet finally gave way. Gajiraa sank into the frigid depths, steam rising as molten BLD and seawater mixed. Izumi hovered in the air above the crater, her silhouette framed by the swirling storm clouds. She let out another thunderous roar, not just of victory, but of proclamation. She was not the heir. She was the new queen. But she did not linger. With her wings still crackling with power, she turned her gaze south, toward Isla de la Muerte. The island stirred. Volcanoes trembled. Roden, the fire demon, was waking. And Izumi, victorious and ascending, began to fly. Sea of Mexico. 3 hours after Roden's awakening. The skies above the Sea of Mexico churned with a chaos born not of weather, but of war. Clouds rolled in thick layers, bloated with lightning, their bellies pulsing with electric fury. Thunder rolled like the voice of a wrathful god, and the sea, Once calm in the aftermath of Roden's volcanic awakening, now twisted under the weight of two encroaching cataclysms. From the south, a living storm approached, stretching across 7 miles of howling wind, surging lightning, and unnatural pressure systems that defied even Monarch's best scientific models. At the eye of it was Izumi. She cut through the clouds like a blade, her massive form ascending across the sky with wings spread wide, miles of sinew, bone, and raw power. Her flight didn't disturb the weather, it birthed it. The storm coiled around her like a living crown, drawn from the atmosphere itself by the electromagnetic pulses rippling from her body. Blue lightning crackled constantly across her scales, leaping from her dorsal plates to the clouds above in jagged bursts of energy. Her wings left shockwaves in the air that displaced clouds and carved deep troughs in the ocean below. Beneath her, the sea boiled. Monarch Outpost, Mobile Command Ship Argus. Sea of Quartz, 150 nautical miles from Roden's volcano. Atmospheric pressure around Izumi has dropped to critical levels. She's destabilizing the upper troposphere. This isn't just a storm. It's a moving disaster zone, shouted Dr. Ishida, gripping the railing of the bridge as the monitors around her flashed red. The command ship Argus, a refitted oil tanker turned Titan observation vessel, groaned under the stress of the surging sea. On every screen, Izumi's storm expanded, spiraling with her as its eye, moving relentlessly toward the center of the Gulf. Storm radius now 7.2 miles, one of the technicians called out. We've never seen anything like this. It's not natural, it's gravitational. She's creating a persistent low-pressure vortex by existing. She's warping the planet's atmosphere with her presence, Dr. Ishida muttered. Gravity, magnetism, electricity, she's using the planet's own systems like limbs. She is the storm. And Roden? Asked Colonel Torres, glancing up from his tablet. Tracking due north. He's flying low over the water, skimming just above the surface. Aggressive. He knows something's coming. Ishida's eyes narrowed as she watched the two signals grow closer on the map. They're heading for each other. There's no deviation in their paths. Roden's approach. Heading north over the Sea of Mexico. Roden's wings ripped the sea asunder with every beat. The crimson glow of volcanic ash still clung to his scales, his molten body steaming as seawater evaporated before it could touch him. He flew low, almost gliding along the surface, his eyes locked on the growing storm far ahead. He sensed her. Roden was a god of the sky, born from fire and pressure and fury, but what he felt now wasn't instinctive rage or territorial agitation, it was dread. A presence older than memory called to him from the storm, not with sound, but with sheer weight. Her power folded the wind and reshaped it in her image. His wings lifted slightly, catching a new current of heated air. The horizon ahead twisted with unnatural colors, green lightning arced across the sky, and clouds formed bizarre geometric patterns that no meteorologist could explain. The sea beneath him trembled. Roden screeched, a warning that echoed across hundreds of miles, but it went unanswered. All for One's observatory, hidden lair, Neo-Kyoto. The feed from his private satellite array was more than enough to paint the picture. Izumi was no longer simply flying, she was ascending. Her gravity output, measured on Monarch's stolen sensors, had increased exponentially. She was now a Class 9 anomaly in Monarch's Titan scale, a designation so catastrophic it had previously only been theoretical. All for One watched the footage with his usual mask of detachment, but behind the false calm, he felt it, fear. She's not heading to Isla de la Muerte just to challenge Roden, he muttered. She's drawing him out. She wants him in the open. He turned away from the screen and stared out at the burning skyline beyond his tower. Other Titans were moving now, drawn by her challenge, by her roar from the Arctic. Some were ignoring her. Others had gone dormant in fear. But Roden had taken the bait. And so would others. She's initiating a purge, he thought. A planetary Dems event. She's not just challenging alphas. She's calling them to die. All for One clenched his gloved fist. No human can survive a world where she rules. Not even me. At sea, under the storm's edge, the crew of the Argus had gone silent. Outside the reinforced windows, the sea churned violently, pushed by cyclonic winds. The vessel's stabilizers whined under the force. Across the skies, green lightning danced in blinding arcs, occasionally spearing downward to strike the ocean in thunderous explosions of steam and foam. Through binoculars, Dr. Ishida caught her first real glimpse of Izumi, not on a monitor, not in satellite feed, but in person. And she did not look mortal. Izumi flew at a height far above the clouds, her silhouette massive against the flashing sky. Her wings, massive and jagged, rippled with storm-born energy. Her body glowed faintly beneath her scaled armor, and her eyes pulsed with violet light. "She's flying higher," Ishida whispered. "She's going to dive." As if in answer, thunder rolled again, louder than before. "Roden has breached visual range," a crewman shouted. Midpoint, above the Sea of Mexico. There, at the nexus of sky and sea, two figures closed the final distance between them. Roden, wings burning like lava, flew straight into the storm, screeching defiantly as winds battered him. The green lightning lashed against his wings, and the sea exploded around his wake, but he pushed forward, aiming for the darkened eye of the storm. And there, descending from the clouds like a vengeful goddess, was Izumi. She made no sound. She didn't roar, didn't cry out, she simply existed, and the world screamed for her. The storm contracted around her as she slowed her descent, her wings folding like a curtain of death. Violet light sparked across her spines. The air around her shimmered with radiation and pressure. Roden flared his wings, screeching again, but Izumi remained still. Waiting. Watching. Her eyes locked on him. Then, like a queen stepping down from her throne, she dipped a single wing and began a slow circle above the ocean. The message was clear. "Face me." Roden answered with a bellowing scream, and shot toward her, claws extended, wings blazing. But Izumi vanished into the clouds at the last second. The storm pulsed with light. The moment of impact was cataclysmic. Izumi and Roden collided midair with the force of crashing tectonic plates. The collision sent shockwaves rippling through the atmosphere, fracturing the electric storm that had swirled around Izumi like a tempestuous crown. Thunder exploded in every direction, and lightning streaked like divine fury unleashed across the sky. Izumi's colossal form was a terrifying sight. 3 sinuous heads, each crowned with jagged bone spines, eyes glowing fierce violet, and scales shimmering like molten metal, stretched wide against the lightning-streaked clouds. Roden's fiery wings beat wildly against the brutal grip of 2 of Izumi's heads, claws raking through the air in a desperate attempt to free himself. With uncanny precision, Izumi's middle head, larger and more terrifying than the others, opened wide. A swirling beam of pure gravitational energy erupted from her maw, a focused, pulsing wave of force that rippled outward with devastating intensity. The beam struck Roden squarely in the chest, compressing and crushing as if the very weight of a collapsing star had been unleashed. Roden screamed, an anguished, primal sound that shattered the storm's roar. His wings faltered under the unbearable force, and he was thrown backward, crashing into the sea below with a titanic splash that sent water surging in towering waves. For a moment, the ocean trembled with the impact. Then, beneath the stormy sky, Roden surfaced, gasping and beaten, but alive. And in that instant, something ancient and inscrutable passed between them. Roden's fiery eyes, once wild with fury and independence, now flickered with a dull, reluctant espionage. He had become hers. Monarch Command Ship Argus. The tension on the Argus was suffocating. The monitors that once tracked 2 forces poised for battle now showed a humiliating aftermath. Dr. Ishida's voice trembled as she stared at the feed. Roden, he's down. He's in the water, and he's not fighting back. Colonel Torres slammed his fist on the console. This can't be happening. Roden is supposed to be one of the strongest Titans, one of our greatest assets. More than that, Ishida whispered, her face pale. He's serving Izumi. We can see it in his behavior. He's obedient to her now. The room fell into stunned silence. Back above the sea, Izumi's heads each worked in concert, two gripping Roden's powerful wings, pinning them tightly while the middle head delivered the crushing blow. Her eyes burned with a violet fire that seared through the storm, a terrifying display of depths that sent ripples through the skies. Roden struggled weakly beneath her grasp, but the crushing force of her gravity beam and the weight of her physical power were overwhelming. Defiance drained from him like blood from a wound. Izumi's roar, low and guttural, echoed through the sky as she released him from her grip, letting the beaten titan fall into the churning ocean. Isla de la Muerte, active volcano. Without hesitation, Izumi turned away from the shattered sea and began to fly southward. The storm around her intensified, twisting and churning as though feeding off her presence. Her massive form streaked through the sky toward Isla de la Muerte, the volcanic island a jagged crown amidst the dark waters. Ash plumed into the sky, and the air was thick with heat and sulfur. Izumi descended onto the volcano's jagged summit with the grace of a goddess and the weight of a cataclysm. The ground trembled beneath her as she landed, her claws sinking into the cracked, molten rock. Then she lifted her three heads to the sky. Her eyes blazed violet, lightning crackled across her scales, and a thunderous, bone-shaking roar burst forth from her three throats in a haunting, primal chorus. The roar was not just a sound but an invocation, deep, guttural, and resonant, rising from the depths of the earth itself. It vibrated through the atmosphere like a summoning bell tolling for ancient gods. It was a roar of dominion, of conquest, of extinction. A call that echoed across the world, a call to awaken the other titans, to answer the summons of the Alpha who had shattered the sky. Monarch Command, panic and horror. On the Argus and across Monarch's network, the broadcast of Izumi's roar struck terror into every operative and scientist. "This isn't a Titan," Ishida said, voice shaking. "This is an extinction-level event." Colonel Torres stared at the screens, his jaw clenched tight. "We underestimated her. We didn't expect Roden to fall so quickly, or at all." Ishida's eyes were wide with disbelief. "And now he serves her. If Roden is beneath her, what hope do we have?" The realization spread like wildfire through Monarch's ranks. Izumi was no mere force of nature. She was a reckoning, an apex predator whose very existence spelled the end of human dominion. The war to control the Titans was over. Now it was a war to survive their emissary. All for one's lair, Neo-Kyoto. The shadowy figure stood motionless before the array of screens, watching Izumi's display unfold. His lips curled into a thin smile, not of triumph, but of cold calculation. Roden defeated so early, subjugated, he murmured. She is worse than the files warned. Monarch's precious Alpha is now her servant. The extinction she brings will be swift and absolute. He turned away, already planning the next phase of his gambit. Izumi was the key, the ultimate weapon, the end of the world as they knew it. And he would be the one to wield her power. The storm still raged, but beneath its fury, the future trembled with uncertainty. Izumi had claimed her throne. And the world would never be the same. The sky bled with crimson as Izumi ascended from the scorched volcanic summit of Isla de la Muerte. Behind her, Roden circled like a sentinel, trailing smoke and fire from his wings as he took up his place in the storm's outer edges. The vortex that followed Izumi expanded, no longer confined to a mere 7 miles. Now it churned outward like a great halo of destruction. Lightning crackled with unnatural frequency, and torrential winds ripped across the clouds. She had one destination, the heart of human power. Washington, D.C. Monarch Global Intel Hub. Location redacted. "She's heading northeast," Ishida said, her voice tight with dread. Estimated trajectory. Washington, D.C. Monarch agents scrambled. Lights blinked red across the world map. "Deploy every Titan-class early warning system. Get the Atlantic Fleet online now. I want an intercept course plotted." Colonel Torres barked. "We cannot let her reach the U.S. mainland." Another tech turned toward the screen, pale-faced. "We may not have to. Sir, Gojira's signal just shifted. He's moving." All eyes turned to the seismic feed. The signature was unmistakable. Gojira was rising from the depths. Where? Torres demanded. Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Right in her path. The command center went silent. The world's last hope had made his choice. North Atlantic Ocean, deep sea trench. The churning waters boiled as something stirred in the darkness below. A brilliant blue glow pierced the abyss. Gajiraa. The ancient titan surfaced with a roar that cracked the sea itself. Steam billowed around him, waves smashed violently outward, and his spines surged with radiant energy. He could sense her now, her storm, her scent, her depths. And he rejected it. Izumi approached with majestic dread, lightning crashing around her tri-headed form. Her wings beat the sky with unnatural rhythm, and her shriek tore through the air like an air raid siren from another world. When the two monsters met in the heart of the Atlantic, the world trembled. The battle begins. Izumi dove from the sky like a meteor. Gajiraa met her charge with a defiant roar and surged forward beneath the waves, his massive tail whipping up tsunamis. The ocean exploded as the two behemoths collided. Claws tore into scales. Teeth met hide. Water boiled with the sheer heat of their fury. Izumi's left head lunged forward, jaws snapping, but Gajiraa caught it mid-strike, his own jaws clamping around its throat. Her two other heads lunged and clawed at his back, screeching in rage as Roden circled overhead, uncertain whether to interfere. Gajiraa didn't let go. He bit harder. With a sickening crack and a geyser of dark BLD, the head tore free from Izumi's body. The shriek Izumi unleashed shook the sea to its bedrock. Her two remaining heads thrashed violently, blasting arcs of gravity lightning in every direction. But Gajiraa didn't relent. He charged again, tackling her midsection with enough force to send them both hurtling below the surface. The ocean churned with a chaos unseen since ancient days, waves swallowing whole container ships caught too close. Monarch Atlantic Operations, USS Leviathan Command Sub. Did he just tear one of her heads off? A technician shouted, watching the sonar feed. Gojira's energy levels are spiking, Ishida confirmed. He's entering full combat phase. If there's a chance to stop her, this is it. But sir, another voice interjected. We still have it. The prototype. The one developed during the Cold War. If we use it now. Colonel Torres hesitated. You're talking about the oxygen destroyer. It's untested. It could kill both of them, Ishida warned. Torres looked at the shaking screens, at the battle raging just miles below the waves. His jaw clenched. We launch. Atlantic Ocean, Hour 3 of combat. Gajiraa was tiring. His heart pounded, his strength slowly ebbing from the sustained assault. Though he had wounded Izumi gravely, she showed no signs of slowing. Her wounds leaked bioluminescent BLD into the sea, but her remaining heads hissed and screeched with relentless fury. Then, everything went quiet. Too quiet. From high above, a sleek missile with strange markings fell like a silver spear. The oxygen destroyer. It plunged into the sea and detonated. The water turned black. Gojira's eyes widened. A wave of invisible force ripped through the deep, a silent pulse of obliteration. All sea life for miles died instantly. Gajiraa convulsed, light fading from his body. She sank. Monarch USS Leviathan. Reading seismic collapse, his energy signature, it's gone, one of the techs gasped. Ishida leaned in, her face ashen. No. His heart has stopped. The room fell silent. A moment later, an alert buzzed. Izumi is moving. She's flying away, heading east by northeast. Toward the coast. No damage? Torres asked. The technician swallowed hard. No. None. Torres turned to the screen, watching the silhouette of the two-headed storm goddess rise from the sea, trailing BLD and thunder behind her. She wasn't affected at all, Ishida whispered. Torres slammed his fist against the control table. We just killed our only shot at stopping her. Izumi, sky above the Atlantic. BLD oozed from her torn neck stump, but Izumi was undeterred. Her wings beat against the clouds as she rose into the stratosphere, lightning spiraling around her like a divine halo. Below, the sea was still. Gojira was gone. Above, the world trembled at what now approached. The Queen of Storms turned her gaze toward the east, toward humanity's capital. And with a final shriek of triumph, she soared into the clouds, a harbinger of extinction. Izumi's battered form cut through the storm-tossed sky, wings slicing the air with terrifying grace. Each powerful beat sent cascades of thunder echoing across the clouds, lightning arcing wildly within the 7-mile radius of her storm. Blood seeped from her torn neck wound, but her 2 remaining heads snarled with unyielding fury. The wound did nothing to slow her inexorable flight toward the heart of human civilization, Washington, D.C. Far below, the shattered ocean still bore the scars of the brutal clash. Waves churned erratically where Gojira had last fought, but the great titan was nowhere to be seen. The sea was eerily silent, a graveyard where hope seemed to drown. Deep beneath the Atlantic, Gojira's underwater lair. Submerged in a cavernous abyssal trench, Gojira lay motionless, his colossal form half buried in silt and coral. His great heart, once a roaring furnace of life, had been stilled by the catastrophic pulse of the oxygen destroyer. For days, his body remained still, unmoving as the ocean currents whispered mournfully through the sunless depths. His breathing was shallow. His eyes were closed, and yet somewhere deep within his chest, faint, imperceptible tremors stirred. Monarch Command Center. Heartbeat detected, Ishida reported, eyes glued to the biometric monitors. The heart rate was weak, barely registering, but unmistakably present. Impossible, Colonel Torres muttered. The oxygen destroyer was supposed to be a complete kill. Not for him, Ishida replied. The pheromones released by Mothra's arrival may be catalyzing regeneration. Where is Mothra now? Torres asked sharply. She's in flight, in her final form. Heading towards the Atlantic. It appears she's drawn to Gojira's lair. Torres exhaled slowly, fingers steepled. If Gojira's heart is beating again, even faintly, it means he's alive. But with a heart that weak, how long until he can challenge Izumi again? Ishida tapped a few keys and grimaced at the projection models. Years. It could take a decade before Gojira regains enough strength to mount a real threat. Years, Torres echoed, fists clenched. We don't have that kind of time. Atlantic Ocean. The arrival of Mothra. The air above the waves shimmered as Mothra, resplendent in her radiant final form, descended like a living comet. Her vast wingspan glittered with iridescent hues, each flap dispersing ethereal pollen and shimmering pheromones into the salty breeze. The particles drifted down to the depths where Gojira rested. Inside the lair, the ancient titan's chest quivered. The first slow beats of his heart returned, weak, irregular, but alive. A pulse echoed like a heartbeat of the earth itself, faint but unmistakable. Mothra's eyes glowed softly as she hovered above the waters, her purpose clear, to nurture the last hope of balance against the storm that was Izumi. Monarch War Room. Torres faced his team, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. If we want to give Gojira a fighting chance, we need to accelerate his recovery. Accelerate? Ishida frowned. The only way to give a titan that much energy is to risk detonation. A nuclear device? Torres asked, eyes hard. Not just any nuke, Ishida replied. A carefully calibrated tactical nuclear payload. Detonated near Gojira's lair underwater, it could infuse him with the energy necessary to jumpstart his regeneration. The blast would be localized, designed to avoid global fallout, but the energy output would be staggering. Torres looked to the holographic projections of Gojira's lair. And the risks? Ishida's face was grim. Massive. Radiation, destabilization of the ocean floor, possible triggering of other seismic activity. Plus, it may anger the other titans. But if we don't act, Torres said, voice low, Izumi will reach Washington. The consequences are unimaginable. Monarch execution. Within hours, Monarch's most covert operatives assembled the components for the underwater tactical nuclear device. Engineers, scientists, and military strategists worked in silent urgency, the threat of extinction looming. Specialized submarines outfitted with the weapon were dispatched. They descended toward the abyss, into the very lair where Gojira stirred. As the submersibles approached the depths, sensors confirmed the faint pulse of Gojira's heart, a fragile beacon of hope. The calm before the storm. Above the surface, the storm around Izumi raged unchecked, a celestial warning. Below, in the darkness, Monarch's gamble waited silently. The balance of survival, the fate of humanity and the Titans, hinged on a single, desperate act. The detonation was coming, and with it, the war would escalate beyond all reckoning. The storm that had swirled around Izumi since her battle with Roden intensified as she approached the eastern shores of the United States. Lightning forked across the darkened skies, thunder rolling like the growls of some ancient beast awakened from slumber. Below, the cities along the eastern seaboard twinkled feebly, unaware of the coming apocalypse. Izumi's immense form loomed over the Atlantic, her three heads scanning the horizon with predatory focus. Her scales glistened wetly in the tempest's fury, and her eyes burned with primal wrath. The 7-mile radius lightning storm pulsed around her like an aura of doom, crackling with raw energy. The capital lay ahead, Washington, D.C., the seat of power, a symbol of humanity's resilience and its hub of governance. It would be her message. With a deafening roar that split the heavens, a sound that carried the weight of millennia and echoed deep into the earth, Izumi descended. Her wings beat with terrifying force, driving windstorms that uprooted trees and shattered windows miles inland. She landed in the Potomac River, water boiling and steaming where her gargantuan feet struck the riverbed. Washington, D.C., unleashed destruction. The city stirred to life in a frenzy. Alarms wailed. Military units scrambling for artillery, missile defense batteries, and whatever could slow the unstoppable. But Izumi was no mere force of nature. Her heads lashed in unison, massive jaws snapping down on the city's famous landmarks. The Washington Monument, a slender obelisk once piercing the sky with pride, crumbled like a twig beneath her crushing bite. The National Mall turned to rubble as she stomped through museums, government buildings, and crowded streets alike. The White House, the symbol of human leadership, was flattened beneath her tail with a sweep so powerful it sent shockwaves through the city. Buildings exploded into clouds of dust and flame, cars hurled like toys, and the very ground shook beneath the apocalypse. Every roar from Izumi vibrated with ancient wrath, a challenge to humanity's dominion. Yet her fury was indiscriminate. No life was spared. Civilians fled in terror, military forces opened fire with everything from rifles to tanks, but none could even scratch her armored hide. Monarch Undersea Mission. Far from the devastation above, the quiet blackness of the ocean depths was shattered by the steady hum of a Monarch submarine. Sleek and reinforced to withstand extreme pressure, the vessel slipped silently toward Gojira's underwater lair. Inside the cramped command center, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew prepared for the mission that could tip the scales of this unfolding war. Payload secure and ready, the weapons officer confirmed, eyes never leaving the monitor. The tactical nuke is primed for deployment. Estimated detonation depth, 3,500 meters. Blast radius localized to minimize environmental fallout. Vasquez nodded grimly. This is the only chance to give Gojira the energy boost he needs to fight back against Izumi. Monarch Command is counting on us. Outside, through the reinforced viewport, the dim outline of Gojira's resting place emerged, the Titan's massive form resting against the cavern floor, his chest rising and falling faintly with fragile life. The weight of decision. Back on Monarch Surface Command, the tension was palpable. Dr. Ishida stared at the real-time telemetry feed. If this works, Gojira's regeneration will accelerate exponentially. But if it fails, the East Coast is finished. Colonel Torres clenched his jaw. We can't afford failure. Izumi's rampage will only escalate. The calm before detonation. Inside the submarine, the crew held their breath as they reached the optimal drop point. Vasquez keyed the release mechanism. The nuclear payload slipped free, descending silently into the abyss. Seconds later, the deep-sea detectors registered the initial pulse. Back in the ruined capital, the sky churned with black clouds as Izumi's storm raged on. Her three heads moved independently, snapping, clawing, and blasting destruction in every direction. The city was her battleground, a monument to the extinction she embodied. The screams of the fleeing population barely reached her ears beneath the thunderous roar of her own fury. Underwater explosion. A brilliant, blinding flash exploded beneath the waves, sending shockwaves racing through the ocean. The seabed trembled violently, displacing massive plumes of sediment and sending geysers of boiling water skyward. In the heart of the blast, Gojira's chest flared with raw, radiant energy. His eyes snapped open, glowing with renewed strength and a deep, feral resolve. The subdued heartbeat thundered into a fierce drumbeat, echoing through the abyss like a war cry reborn. "Monarch command. Gojira is alive, and he's coming," Ishida whispered. Torres steeled himself. "Then it's time to make our next move." Washington, D.C. Izumi's roar shattered the air once more, one final reminder that the war for the planet had truly begun. The ocean trembled with renewed fury as Gojira stirred from the depths. The nuclear blast had done more than just revive him. It had awakened a storm inside the Titan's very core. His massive form surged upward through the abyss, slicing through the water with powerful, sweeping strokes of his tail. Each movement churned the sea into boiling froth, sending waves crashing against the shoreline hundreds of miles away. His eyes, glowing with a fierce, electric blue intensity, fixed unwaveringly on the distant capital. Washington, D.C., a beacon of destruction left by Izumi's wrath, now became his target. This was a battle not just of titans, but a war of dominion, an ancient struggle rekindled. The awakening and approach of the titans. Far across the globe, the echoes of Izumi's devastating roar reverberated through the Earth's crust and atmosphere, a primal call that stirred others from their slumber. Mothra, in her luminous, final form, fluttered gracefully from the mountainous forests of Yunnan. Her iridescent wings shimmered in the moonlight as she took to the sky, the soft hum of her powerful wings sounding like a mournful hymn. Mothra's purpose was clear: she would confront Izumi, perhaps to reason, or to challenge the storm incarnate. Roden, recovering from his subjugation, still nursed the humiliation of defeat. His enormous wings cast dark shadows over the volcanic island as he stirred from his fiery lair. Though weakened, a burning rage fueled his every move, compelling him to join the unfolding conflict despite his compromised strength. Shimo, the mysterious and elusive Titan, had vanished after the last confrontation. No one could confirm his exact whereabouts, but the tremors under the earth hinted at his restless movements. Monarch seismologists tracked subtle shifts beneath the crust, suggesting Shimo was mobilizing, preparing for a reckoning. Behemoth and Leviathan, colossal creatures unleashed in recent years, had been drawn to the growing maelstrom. The eastern seaboard and the Aegean Sea became their domains of destruction, but reports confirmed they were now pivoting north and west, their instincts pushing them toward the epicenter of the Titan upheaval. Monarch and global response. Monarch surveillance outposts lit up with frantic activity as each Titan's movement was tracked in real time. Analysts scrambled to predict the convergence points, communicate with allied nations, and deploy countermeasures. Dr. Ishida paced the command room. Izumi's power is unparalleled. If these Titans unite, humanity's survival chances plummet. We must prepare for massive coordinated efforts. Colonel Torres grimaced. And Kong? Still trapped on Skull Island. His absence weakens our defense significantly. An extraction mission is underway, Ishida replied, though uncertainty lingered in his voice. But time is running out. All for One's observation. Far away in Neo-Kyoto, All for One observed the seismic data streaming in from Monarch's global sensor net. A cruel smile spread across his face. The great Titans are gathering, but Izumi remains the true alpha. An extinction-level event indeed. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. Their convergence will reshape the world. Soon, I will be there to assess the chaos. The war against the heroes will shift irrevocably in my favor. The Great Convergence. As Gojira accelerated toward the east coast, the skies darkened with ominous clouds generated by Izumi's lingering storm. From all directions, the Earth's ancient guardians moved with deadly purpose, drawn to the tempest of power at the heart of the ruined capital. The stage was set. The Titans were on the move. The world itself held its breath. The skyline of Washington, D.C. lay shattered beneath a turbulent sky, a fractured skeleton of humanity's once great capital. Smoke curled from toppled monuments and shattered buildings, their ruins echoing the destructive path Izumi had carved through the city. Yet even amidst the devastation, the true storm was only beginning. From the Atlantic's dark horizon emerged a titanic figure, his immense silhouette cutting through the morning haze. Gojira, empowered and raging, thundered ashore with the force of a hurricane. Each step sent shockwaves rolling through the cracked earth. His eyes blazed with a renewed, unnatural energy, amplified by the nuclear detonation that had rekindled his heart. Izumi, sensing the arrival of her ancient rival, lifted herself from the ruined capital lawn. Her multiple heads surveyed the advancing Titan, the swirling tempest around her intensifying, crackling with lightning that illuminated her grotesque, spider-like form. Her eyes burned with cold fury, a predator welcoming the challenge. The beginning of the battle. Without hesitation, Gojira charged forward, his roar reverberating through the desolation like a primal drumbeat. Izumi responded with a bellow that shook the heavens, the storm spiraling outward in a 7-mile radius, a vortex of crackling electricity and thunderous winds. The first clash was titanic. Gojira swung his massive tail like a battering ram, but Izumi's multiple agile limbs twisted and dodged with unnatural speed. She lashed out with her sharp claws, raking across Gojira's armored hide, tearing deep gouges that hissed with burning energy. Gojira retaliated with a powerful blast of his atomic breath, a searing beam of radioactive fury. But Izumi anticipated the attack. Her slender middle head arched backward, and with a sudden burst of speed she twisted sideways, the beam slicing through a column of ruined skyscraper behind her, missing her by mere inches. She countered with a devastating gravity lightning beam, channeled from the storm raging above, aimed directly at Gojira's chest. The impact sent the Titan crashing into the shattered remains of the Washington Monument, chunks of stone pulverized beneath his massive frame. Depths in the destruction. Despite the surge of power in Gojira's veins, the battle quickly shifted in Izumi's favor. Her multiple heads coordinated seamlessly, attacking from angles no single-headed beast could match. She struck with precision, snapping jaws, grappling limbs, and piercing stingers lashing out in rapid succession. Gojira's atomic breath, once his signature weapon, was rendered nearly useless against the swirling storm that shielded Izumi. Each time he prepared the attack, Izumi baited him into firing prematurely, then slipped away, using the storm's energy to launch devastating counterattacks. The fight raged through the city, a terrifying ballet of destruction. Streets cracked open beneath their feet, trees were uprooted, and the shattered remnants of monuments became flying debris. Lightning arced through the air, setting ablaze everything it touched, and the ground trembled as the two colossal forces clashed. The human element. Watching from a hidden monarch outpost, scientists and military strategists scrambled to comprehend the scale of the conflict. Gojira's power is immense, one analyst whispered, voice shaking. But Izumi, she's outmaneuvering him at every turn. Colonel Torres barked orders to evacuation teams. We need to clear the surrounding area. If this keeps escalating, the entire region is at risk of being wiped out. A team monitored seismic activity. Every heavy step from the Titans caused aftershocks strong enough to register as minor earthquakes. Monarch's chief scientist grimly noted, "We're witnessing the power of legends, a force of nature that dwarfs all human technology." The tide of the fight. Gojira, battered but unyielding, roared in frustration, his renewed heart pounding in his chest with relentless rhythm. He lunged, swinging his tail with brutal force, catching one of Izumi's limbs and snapping it clean off. Blood oozed from the wound, but Izumi barely faltered, her remaining heads hissed in anger and doubled their assault. Izumi's strategy became clear: wear him down, test his limits, and deny him the chance to use his full power effectively. Each failed atomic breath left Gojira more vulnerable, his stamina taxed by the fierce storm and relentless pressure. Amidst the chaos, Izumi's wings unfurled briefly, catching the storm's energy as she prepared to launch into the air. The battle was far from over, but already the balance had shifted, and the city lay witness to a Titan's wrath that would echo through history. As the cataclysmic battle between Izumi and Gojira tore through the heart of Washington, D.C., a new tempest brewed high above the ruined skyline. The air crackled with electricity and the heavy scent of ozone as two colossal figures tore through the storm-swollen skies. Roden and Mothra, locked in a deadly aerial contest that mirrored the devastation below. The arrival of Roden and Mothra. Roden's massive, jagged wings cleaved the turbulent air with savage power. His obsidian scales shimmered with volcanic embers, a living tempest of flame and fury. His eyes burned like molten lava, filled with primal rage and unyielding defiance. The massive pterosaur swept in low over the city, talons poised to rend and wings beating gusts of hurricane force. Not far behind, Mothra emerged in her final majestic form, a luminescent colossus cloaked in iridescent wings that shimmered with hues of sapphire, emerald, and violet. Her presence brought a stark contrast to Roden's ferocity, radiating a serene but resolute power. From her antennae, faint waves of pheromones pulsed into the air, a subtle aura of command and ancient magic. The battle in the skies. Without warning, Roden let out a bone-chilling screech and dove straight toward Mothra. The massive wings of both titans clashed in midair, sending shockwaves rolling through the clouds. Roden's beak snapped with brutal force, trying to tear through Mothra's shimmering wings, but Mothra twisted nimbly, evading the strikes with an almost otherworldly grace. Mothra retaliated, sending a radiant pulse of bioluminescent energy blasting from her wings. The energy struck Roden squarely, igniting bursts of flame along his obsidian scales. Roden shrieked in pain but countered with a powerful tail swipe, forcing Mothra to dodge with a burst of speed. Lightning crackled through the sky around them as their battle stirred the storm into a frenzy. The swirling tempest seemed to respond to Izumi's storm below, as if the entire atmosphere was a reflection of the Titan's rage. Their fight as a backdrop to destruction. Far below, Izumi and Gojira's brutal fight raged on, but the destruction on the ground was now overshadowed by the ferocity above. Buildings trembled not just from the impact of massive limbs but also from thunderous roars and sonic booms echoing through the sky. Monarch observers at their distant outposts scrambled to keep pace with the dual disasters. One analyst's voice trembled over the comm: Roden and Mothra, they're clashing directly over DC, adding a whole new level of threat. This isn't just a ground battle anymore, the entire atmosphere is a war zone. Strategic chaos. Roden dove repeatedly with lethal intent, trying to use his supersonic speed to break Mothra's defenses. Each time, Mothra met him with bursts of dazzling light and pheromone waves that seemed to slow and confuse the volcanic titan. The aerial duel was not only physical but deeply primal, an ancient rivalry unfolding anew with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. The battle showed no signs of yielding, neither would retreat. The pair tore through clouds and battered the few remaining intact structures with wing beats strong enough to level neighborhoods. Monarch's desperation. Back in the command centers, Monarch's leadership scrambled for options. Commander Reyes barked into his radio, "We're stretched thin. Ground units can't intervene against these aerial behemoths, and our anti-air defenses are useless against titans of this scale. We have to buy time for Izumi and Gojira to finish," the chief scientist added grimly. "If Roden and Mothra keep this up, the city will be wiped from the map. No survivors, no chance for containment." The sky and earth in turmoil. As the titans raged in both sky and land, the storm around Izumi intensified, lightning bolts cascading through the roiling clouds, perfectly timed with each devastating blow. Roden, his wings scorched but his fury undiminished, roared again, signaling a fresh onslaught. Mothra responded with a radiant glow that bathed the battlefield in ethereal light, refusing to yield. Below, Izumi locked eyes with Gojira, her storm swirling wider as if feeding off the clash above. The fight for Washington had become a cosmic reckoning, elemental forces of destruction battling for Demps, while humanity cowered beneath their wrath. The battle above the shattered capital was far from over, the sky itself a war-torn battlefield where legends collided. The brutal clash between Izumi and Gojira was reaching its crescendo amidst the shattered ruins of Washington, D.C. With a sudden, overwhelming burst of strength, Izumi's multiple heads lashed out, catching Gojira off guard. Using two of her massive heads, she grabbed hold of Gojira's shoulders with an unrelenting grip. The weight of the ocean's mightiest titan now rested in her grasp. With a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very heavens, Izumi spread her massive wings and surged upward, tearing away from the broken cityscape. Gojira thrashed wildly, trying to free himself, but Izumi's grasp was ironclad. Higher and higher she ascended, the air growing thin and cold as the pair pierced through layers of clouds, the blue sky giving way to the endless blackness of the stratosphere. From this dizzying height, Washington looked like a shattered model beneath her, a grim testament to their destruction. The stratospheric drop. Izumi's storm swirled violently around her, lightning crackling in tandem with her thunderous breath. For a moment, she held Gojira in the silent tension of the upper atmosphere, the air around them shimmering with raw power. Then, without warning, Izumi reared back one of her massive necks and gave a guttural roar of Demps before hurling Gojira downward with unimaginable force. Gojira plummeted through the layers of the atmosphere, sonic booms trailing behind his descent. As he neared the earth, the sky itself seemed to shatter under the impact of his collision. The ground trembled and cracked beneath him as the water and earth erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves rippling across the ruined city. Kong's arrival. At that precise moment, far off the coast, a sleek monarch vessel sliced through the turbulent waters, making its final approach toward the broken capital. Aboard the ship, the heavy air was thick with tension and anticipation. The massive silhouette of Kong loomed on the deck, his muscular frame towering as he stepped off the ship. His eyes, sharp and determined, scanned the horizon. The destruction that stretched out before him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Washington, D.C. was a wasteland, smoke and ruin stretching as far as the eye could see. Kong let out a deep, resonant growl, sensing the stillness after the storm. He flexed his massive fists, readying himself for the inevitable confrontation. The moment of collision. From the horizon, Gojira's impact shook the earth beneath Kong's feet. The Titan's guttural bellows echoed through the air as he staggered, wounded but far from defeated. Izumi circled high above, her storm a swirling tempest of lightning and fury. Kong's gaze locked upward, a silent challenge passing between the three colossal forces, the primal king of Skull Island, the atomic behemoth fallen from the sky, and the unstoppable, multi-headed terror that ruled the storm. The battle for the future of the world was entering its deadliest phase, and Kong was ready to stake his claim. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and ash as Kong and Izumi faced each other amid the shattered remains of Washington, D.C. The massive ape's chest heaved with measured breaths, muscles coiled like springs ready to snap. Despite the destruction all around them, Kong's eyes burned with a fierce determination, a raw primal will that refused to back down, even against a creature as terrifying as Izumi. Izumi's many heads swiveled in unison, multiple pairs of glowing eyes locked on Kong, her storm still swirling in a 7-mile radius, crackling with relentless lightning. The tempest around her cast an eerie glow over the battlefield, illuminating the scars and debris strewn about like remnants of a forgotten world. With a guttural roar that echoed like thunder, Izumi launched the first strike. Her enormous clawed arms slammed forward with the force of a collapsing mountain, aiming to crush Kong outright. But Kong was ready. Dodging with surprising agility for a creature of his size, Kong rolled to the side, narrowly evading the blow. His own massive fists swung back in retaliation, smashing into one of Izumi's legs with a bone-rattling impact. The ground trembled beneath their blows, fissures spiderwebbing across the pavement. A grim battle. Kong's fighting style was raw and brutal, close-quarters brawling that relied on his immense strength and resilience. He pounded and grappled, clawed and dodged, each movement a desperate effort to hold his ground against the overwhelming might of Izumi. Izumi, for her part, was a tempest of controlled fury. Lightning crackled across her scales as she moved with terrifying precision, her multiple heads coordinating attacks from different angles, trying to overwhelm Kong's defenses. At one moment, she unleashed a surge of electrical energy, sending arcs of lightning crackling toward Kong's chest. He barely managed to raise an arm in time, the searing bolts scorching but not felling him. Kong grunted through the pain and surged forward again, slamming his shoulder into Izumi's side, trying to push her back. Izumi's massive wings unfurled, and with a violent sweep, she knocked Kong off balance, sending him crashing into the ruins of a collapsed skyscraper. Nearly even match. Despite the overwhelming odds, Kong's stubborn endurance was unmatched. He fought with a desperate vigor that surprised even those watching. His strikes slowed Izumi's advance and forced her to constantly adjust her tactics. Izumi's multi-headed assault was relentless, but Kong's raw power and unyielding willpower kept him barely afloat in this deadly dance. Every time Izumi attempted to finish the fight, Kong countered, a punch to the jaw, a kick to the abdomen, a grapple that forced Izumi to momentarily cease her lightning strikes and focus on breaking free. The storm and the fury. The storm swirling around Izumi intensified, lightning flashing wildly as if mirroring her growing frustration. But Kong refused to yield. At one point, Izumi charged up a crackling gravity lightning beam from her central head, preparing to unleash a devastating blast that could end the fight. Kong, sensing the imminent danger, launched himself upward with astonishing speed, dodging the searing beam by mere inches. The beam tore through the remnants of a government building, leveling it to rubble in a shower of sparks and debris. Kong landed HRD on Izumi's flank, grabbing hold and attempting to wrestle her to the ground. The fight became a brutal contest of strength and endurance, Izumi using her sheer mass and power to try to crush Kong beneath her, Kong using every ounce of his strength and agility to avoid being pinned. A titanic deadlock. Neither Titan could claim a decisive upper hand. Izumi's power was beyond anything Kong had ever faced, but his grit and resilience kept him in the fight. The battle was a stalemate, a raw, titanic struggle between elemental forces that shook the very foundations of the city. As lightning flashed and the earth quaked beneath them, Kong growled fiercely, refusing to let the storm-wreathed behemoth claim victory so easily. Izumi's many heads hissed and roared in frustration, her storm reaching a fever pitch, but she knew better than to underestimate the primal fury of the ape before her. The War of Titans was far from over. But tonight, Kong had proven he was no easy foe. High above the storm-ravaged ruins of Washington, D.C., the sky darkened further as Roden and Mothra clashed fiercely. The air was ripped apart by the beating of Roden's massive wings, each flap stirring violent gusts that shattered glass and tore at the weakened city below. His beak snapped viciously at Mothra, who darted with ethereal grace, her final form shimmering with an otherworldly radiance, wings like stained glass catching the flickering lightning. Roden was a furious tempest of fire and fury, his raw aggression driven by rage and desperation. Yet, Mothra was calm and precise, weaving between his assaults with a fluidity that belied her size. Her wings pulsed with radiant energy as she released piercing pheromones that twisted through the charged air, influencing even the very titans around her. The battle was brutal and swift. Roden, despite his volcanic strength, was gradually overwhelmed by Mothra's relentless assaults. She unleashed powerful bursts of bioluminescent energy, striking Roden's wings and chest with searing light that disrupted his flight and precision. With one final, soaring dive, Mothra smashed into Roden's side, driving him into a spiral descent toward the sea below. Roden crashed into the turbulent waters, his enormous form sinking beneath the waves, defeated and broken. The once mighty Lord of the Skies was vanquished, his fiery rage extinguished, for now. A desperate plea. But the battle's end was only the beginning of Mothra's sacrifice. Izumi's roar, an earth-shattering challenge echoing like a dark storm, had ripped through the battlefield moments before. Gajiraa, battered and bloodied from his relentless duel with Izumi, lay weary near the water's edge. The vast storm still whipped about Izumi's form, crackling with raw, uncontrollable power. Mothra knew what was coming. Her luminous eyes locked onto Izumi, pleading silently for mercy, for Gojira's life. She spread her glowing wings wide and took to the skies between the two titans, her voice ringing clear and powerful as she released a final, desperate plea. Izumi's many heads paused, the storm momentarily faltering as her gaze turned toward Mothra. The Titanus descended, wings folding, her radiant energy intensifying as she prepared to do the unthinkable. The sacrifice. Mothra's body began to glow with an intense, pure light. Her form shimmered and flickered, as if dissolving into the very air around her. Slowly, her spirit poured from her corporeal shell, a luminous mist flowing toward Gajiraa like liquid starlight. The radiant energy melted into Gojira's battered body, seeping through his scales and into his core. His eyes snapped open, blazing with a new ferocity, a white-hot intensity that radiated pure energy and ancient power. The energy coursed through him, setting his entire being aflame with a brilliant glow that resembled molten lava streaked with glowing white veins. His scales cracked and shimmered with the raw energy of rebirth, a blazing inferno of power unlike anything ever witnessed. This was no ordinary healing. It was a transformation, an ascension into a new, legendary form. Burning Godzilla, the rebirth. Gojira's roar split the sky, a thunderous bellow of both agony and triumph. Flames flickered and danced across his body as his size and strength surged beyond all previous limits. His breath ignited with searing intensity, hotter than any atomic blast before, crackling with radiant fury. This was the burning Godzilla, the embodiment of raw nuclear force and ancient wrath. Monarch operatives and scientists monitoring the battlefield watched in awe and horror as Gajiraa rose anew. His power was beyond measure, his form a radiant beacon of destruction and potential salvation. Yet the cost was clear. Mothra's physical form was gone, her sacrifice eternal. Her spirit now lived within Gajiraa, a guardian force fueling his renewed strength, a final act of love and defiance against the devastation wrought by Izumi's fury. A turning tide. As Izumi's storm raged on, the newly reborn Gajiraa stood tall, eyes blazing with the combined will of two titans, one fallen, one unyielding. The battle was far from over, but now the scales had shifted. Mothra's sacrifice had given Gajiraa a fighting chance, a chance to stand against Izumi's overwhelming power. The storm pulsed around Izumi, but a new fire burned in Gojira's heart. The war for Earth's fate was only just beginning. The newly reborn Gajiraa, his massive form glowing with the searing energy of the burning Godzilla transformation, let out a terrifying roar that seemed to shake the very atmosphere above Washington, D.C. The city's ruined skyline trembled as his body began to pulse with an intense, radioactive glow. Suddenly, with a deep guttural growl, Gajiraa unleashed a devastating nuclear pulse, a rolling wave of raw atomic energy bursting outward in a blinding flash of white and blue light. The force of the pulse slammed into Izumi like a brutal tidal wave. The lightning storm swirling in the 7-mile radius around her was momentarily torn apart by the sheer power of the blast. The shockwave pushed her back violently through the air, cracking the clouds and igniting the atmosphere around her. Smoke curled from her wings, especially the delicate membranes stretched between the clawed bones. Patches of scorched, blackened flesh marked where the nuclear pulse had seared through her defenses. Despite the damage, Izumi's many heads snarled defiantly, her glowing eyes burning brighter than ever as she shook off the aftereffects. Clash of Titans. The second wave. The battlefield erupted into chaos once more. Gajiraa charged forward, his immense claws gouging deep scars into the shattered streets, sending chunks of concrete and steel flying. His glowing, irradiated breath crackled with raw nuclear energy as he aimed to overwhelm Izumi. Izumi met him head-on, wings spread wide, lightning dancing along her serpentine necks. Her tails lashed with crushing force, knocking aside Gojira's strikes, while her middle head opened wide to fire a crackling gravity lightning beam. The beam tore through the smoky air, grazing Gojira's armored chest and leaving sizzling scorch marks. Gojira roared in pain and fury but kept pressing forward, each swipe and bite from him fueled by the nuclear power surging through his veins. The two titans exchanged blows, their combat shaking the earth and sky alike. A clash not just of brute strength, but of pure, cataclysmic energy. Kong's makeshift arsenal. Meanwhile, on the fractured ground far below the soaring titans, Kong was hard at work. His massive hands tore apart the skeletal remains of a collapsed building, ripping out chunks of metal piping, shattered girders, and twisted rebar. With fierce determination, Kong fashioned crude but effective weapons. Massive clubs, spiked maces, and jagged throwing spears, each fashioned from the wreckage around him. He grunted in grim focus, his eyes locked on Izumi, who remained locked in a fierce duel high above. From a safe distance, Kong began hurling these improvised weapons skyward with astounding strength and accuracy. The heavy metal spears cut through the turbulent air like missiles, each aimed to disrupt or distract Izumi. Some of the thrown weapons slammed against her, clattering off her scales or piercing wing membranes. Izumi roared in frustration but barely faltered, using her immense power and agility to dodge most of the barrage. Strategic Gambit. Kong's hit-and-run tactic provided crucial support to Gojira's relentless assault. The Titan's thunderous blows and the barrage of projectiles created a pincer effect, forcing Izumi to split her attention. Izumi's heads darted rapidly, firing bolts of gravity lightning in every direction, striking down many of Kong's projectiles mid-air. Yet, even her incredible reflexes couldn't stop every weapon. Some found their mark, tearing into her wings and armor like scales. The storm surrounding Izumi pulsed violently as the air crackled with electric tension, but the combination of Gojira's raw nuclear might and Kong's guerrilla tactics began to wear her down. Monarch's viewpoint. Monarch scientists and commanders, watching from the relative safety of their mobile command centers, recorded every second of the titanic battle with a mixture of awe and dread. Gojira's nuclear pulse, effective beyond expectations, one analyst muttered, eyes glued to the screen. Izumi's wings are sustaining critical damage. But her retaliatory strikes, they're staggering. Another officer keyed a comm link. Kong's using hit-and-run tactics. It's a smart move, she's fast and lethal, but vulnerable to coordinated pressure. A grim voice responded, if this keeps up, Izumi could be forced into retreat. But she's unpredictable, don't underestimate her. Unyielding fury. Above all, Izumi refused to back down. Her 7-mile storm raged fiercer than ever, lightning strikes slashing through the sky like whips of divine wrath. Despite the searing burns and the relentless onslaught, her glowing eyes blazed with primal fury. With a snarl, she beat her scorched wings, whipping up an electrical tempest that shattered Kong's trajectory and drove Gojira back, if only for a moment. The fight for Washington, D.C. was far from over, and the cost to the world around them only grew higher with every devastating clash. The colossal duel between Izumi and Gojira reached a pivotal crescendo. The battle had raged on for what felt like hours, with blasts of nuclear energy and crackling gravity lightning illuminating the shattered skyline of Washington, D.C. Now, both titans bore the marks of their brutal conflict, scars, burns, and torn flesh painted across their gargantuan bodies. Izumi's storm-swirling aura flickered with latent energy, her 7-mile-wide tempest still crackling with fierce electric wrath. But beneath the storm's fury lay a cold, calculated predator stalking her prey. The moment of lock. With a sudden burst of speed, Izumi closed the distance between them with terrifying precision. No longer relying on aerial maneuvers or lightning beams, she struck with deadly intent. Her massive jaws clamped down on Gojira's thick neck, serrated teeth sinking deep into the armored flesh beneath the glowing dorsal plates. Gojira roared in raw pain, thrashing wildly, but Izumi's grip was unyielding. Before he could shake her off, two of her other heads lunged simultaneously, one sinking sharp fangs into the side of Gojira's torso, where the kidney should lie, the other raking claws into the muscular thigh, digging in like vicious grapples. Izumi's entire form tensed, muscles rippling as she locked her multiple jaws and claws into place. Her eyes, blazing a fierce electric purple, glowed ominously as she began to draw forth something terrifying from Gojira's very core, his energy. The draining begins. From the bites and rakes, tendrils of glowing, radiant energy, visible as shimmering waves of nuclear power, began flowing from Gojira's wounds into Izumi's maw and claws. The energy crackled and hissed, visibly recharging her storm and amplifying the lightning that roared around her. The draining was not mere physical bloodletting. It was something far more primal and devastating. Gojira's chest glowed a duller, fading red-orange as his nuclear heart began to falter. His mighty roar, once a triumphant declaration of power, now trembled with agony and desperation. Monarch's horror. Monarch's command center fell deathly silent as monitors tracked the horrific scene. The lead scientist's face drained of color, eyes wide behind thick lenses. "She's draining his nuclear energy." The voice barely rose above a whisper, trembling with dread. "This isn't normal quirk or monster behavior. She's siphoning the very core of his power, the radiation, the atomic energy itself." A veteran Monarch field commander clenched his jaw. "If she keeps this up, Gojira won't just lose the fight, he'll die." The room buzzed with frantic activity as emergency protocols were discussed. But the sheer scale of the energy transfer was overwhelming. All for One's calculated fear. Far away, All for One watched the battle feed with a cold, inscrutable expression. His lips curled into a thin, sharp smile, then vanished into a grim line. This is beyond anything I anticipated," he muttered in the shadowed depths of his lair. "She's not just a threat. She's an extinction-level event." The revelation struck him harder than any defeat. Izumi's ability to drain the Alpha Titan's nuclear core meant she could unmake the balance of nature itself, leaving nothing but devastation in her wake. All for One's fingers twitched on the armrest of his throne. If she drains Gojira completely, no other Titan will stand against her. Gojira's last stand. Despite the pain and the energy loss, Gojira's primal instincts flared in a desperate survival instinct. His free limbs pounded into Izumi's massive frame, attempting to dislodge her fangs and claws. His glowing eyes flashed with defiant fury. But Izumi's grip was ironclad. Her many heads worked in deadly concert, drawing deeper and deeper on his nuclear essence, her body humming with the stolen power. Above the city ruins, the storm around Izumi intensified, crackling with electric energy fueled by the stolen nuclear fire. The battle was no longer just a contest of strength. It was a terrifying predator feeding on the heart of the world's mightiest guardian. The world held its breath. Izumi's true nature, as an alpha predator and an agent of extinction, was revealed in brutal clarity. And the nightmare was only beginning. The battlefield was a wreckage of scorched earth, shattered buildings, and boiling seas. Washington, D.C. had become a sprawling graveyard for titanic conflict, its monuments dwarfed and broken beneath the Titan's feet. Above the ruins, a roiling electric storm encircled Izumi, her many heads locked onto Gojira as she drained the nuclear heart from his body. The Alpha Titan's strength was fading fast, his glowing core dimming with every agonizing moment. Inside Monarch's underground command center, the tension was suffocating. Operators were shouting updates and running simulations, but the grim truth was undeniable. If Izumi succeeded, Gojira would die, and with him, humanity's last hope. The urgency of desperation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Monarch's chief biotechnologist, slammed her fist on the table, eyes wild with urgency. "We can't just sit here watching him get drained like a battery. We need to give Kong a fighting chance. He's the only one who can physically intervene and pull Gojira free before it's too late." General Marcus Caldwell, head of Monarch's tactical operations, nodded grimly. "Agreed. But Kong's raw strength alone isn't enough. Izumi's power and speed far outmatch him. We need to upgrade him, give him an edge." A hush fell across the room as the word settled. You mean augmentations? Yes, Elena replied firmly. Protocol powerhouse. Protocol powerhouse, the mechanical arm. The military-industrial complex had long experimented with cybernetic enhancements for kaiju combat. The protocol was developed for worst-case scenarios, combining organic muscle with mechanical precision to amplify strength and dexterity. Monarch had a single mechanical arm prototype designed specifically for Kong, a towering, reinforced cybernetic limb engineered to withstand and deliver colossal force. It could interface directly with Kong's nervous system, responding in real time to his neural impulses, effectively becoming an extension of his will. The arm was a monstrous piece of technology: titanium alloy plating, hydraulics strong enough to crush tanks, integrated weaponized grappling hooks, and sensory modules to detect energy signatures, including Izumi's volatile storm aura. Equipping the last defender. In the docking bay of Monarch's flagship, the Argus, Kong stood waiting, a grim look on his massive face. The ship's engineers worked quickly, fitting the gleaming mechanical arm onto his left side, surgically attaching it with a complex mesh of neural connectors. Kong grunted through the pain and strain, flexing the new limb experimentally. The arm responded instantly. Hydraulic pistons hissed as he clenched his fist, grappling hooks extending and retracting with smooth precision. The mechanical arm gleamed under the harsh lights, a gleaming symbol of humanity's desperate gamble. Strategizing the rescue. Back in command, Elena and Caldwell reviewed the live feed from DC. The camera showed Izumi's storm swirling violently as she continued draining Gojira's fading nuclear core. Time is running out, Caldwell said. Once she's fully drained, Gojira's down for good. Elena's eyes sharpened. Kong's mission is to break Izumi's grip and extract Gojira before that happens. The arm gives him the power to grapple and pry, something he lacked before. General Caldwell's voice was resolute. We're sending him in. Monarch forces will provide support from the ground and air, but Kong is the spear tip. The descent into chaos. Moments later, Monarch's transport shuttles dropped Kong directly into the heart of the devastated city. The Titan moved with renewed determination, the mechanical arm glowing faintly as sensors locked onto Izumi's energy signature. Above, the swirling storm expanded, lightning flashing violently as Izumi tightened her grasp, her multiple jaws still locked on Gojira. Kong's booming roar echoed through the ruined streets as he charged. The climactic confrontation. Izumi's many eyes flicked toward the approaching Kong, her storm twisting with intensified lightning. She bared fangs, clearly anticipating the fight, but Kong was no longer the same brute who had struggled before. The mechanical arm hummed with potential. With a deafening crash, Kong closed the gap. Using the mechanical arm's grappling hooks, he launched them at Izumi's claws and jaws, hooking onto her armored plating with a force that shook the air itself. Izumi snarled in surprise and fury, attempting to shake the hooks loose, but Kong's grip was unbreakable. With immense strength, Kong began to pry at her jaws, pulling her off Gojira. The struggle for the alpha. The ocean around them churned violently as the battle intensified. Gojira, though weakened, summoned a desperate roar, his body glowing faintly as he tried to draw on what little nuclear energy remained. Izumi hissed and thrashed, but Kong's mechanical arm held firm, steadily forcing her jaws apart. Sparks flew as claw met metal in a brutal contest of power. Monarch watches with bated breath. From the command center, Monarch personnel watched tensely. Come on, Kong. You're their only hope, Elena whispered. The feed showed Kong gritting his teeth, every fiber of his massive frame straining against Izumi's power. Slowly, agonizingly, the grip on Gojira loosened. A glimmer of hope. With a final, thunderous heave, Kong wrenched Izumi free from Gojira's neck. She stumbled back, snarling with rage and pain, lightning sparks flying wildly from her body. Gojira, now freed, crashed into the ocean, struggling but alive. His nuclear heart beat weakly, but it still beat. Kong let out a triumphant roar, mechanical arm raised like a battle standard. The battle is far from over. But the war was not over. Izumi's eyes burned with fury, her storm pulsing, her power still overwhelming. Kong had bought them time. Time that Monarch, and the world, would desperately need. The air above the ruined city was thick with the scent of ozone and smoke, crackling with residual electricity from Izumi's furious storm. The ground trembled beneath the titanic combatants as Kong and Gojira, an unlikely but resolute team, stood united against the storm-wreathed fury of Izumi. The battle that had seemed hopeless moments ago was suddenly tipping. A fragile alliance in the eye of the storm. Kong's mechanical arm gleamed under the darkened sky, each movement precise and deadly as he dodged a searing bolt of lightning arcing from Izumi's wings. Despite his exhaustion, the primate titan's muscles coiled and unleashed with renewed vigor, hammering Izumi's armored flanks with crushing blows. Beside him, Gojira's massive form pulsed with a faint blue glow, the last embers of his nuclear heart powering his strikes. He lunged with surprising speed, striking Izumi's side with colossal force. His claws scraped her obsidian-like scales, leaving deep gouges where light seeped in like cracks in a fortress. Together, the two titans worked in tandem, one distracting, the other striking. Kong's powerful swipes drove Izumi's heads to defend, while Gojira smashed into her tail and legs, trying to hamper her flight. Izumi on the defensive, for now. Izumi snarled, the fury in her eyes growing as her stormy aura flickered with uneven pulses. For the first time since emerging from her tomb, she was being pushed back, her once overwhelming depths chipped away by this dual assault. Kong seized the moment, launching a savage uppercut with his mechanical arm that sent one of Izumi's heads crashing into a crumbled monument. Gojira followed, slamming into her wings, making her stagger unsteadily in the sky. "Keep it up," came the crackling voice of Monarch's tactical command over the comms. "We've never seen her hesitate before." The calm before the storm. But Izumi was far from beaten. With a deep, guttural growl vibrating through her three throats, she reared back, eyes glowing a terrifying purple-white. A rumbling roar began deep within her, an echoing sound that reverberated across the shattered landscape and far beyond, through the storm clouds overhead. Kong and Gojira froze, sensing the gathering tempest. The electric storm swirling within the 7-mile radius around Izumi's form intensified, bolts crackling like WHP lashes of raw energy, the winds howling in response. The roar that shook the world. Then, with a roar unlike any before, deep, guttural, and layered with the primal power of ages, Izumi unleashed her full fury. The sound exploded outward, a cascading wave of guttural bellows and thunderous vibrations, shaking the very bones of the earth and sky. It was a challenge, a summons to all titans and a declaration of war. Lightning erupted from her many heads, converging into a vast, arcing storm that crackled and hissed, a living web of electric death spanning miles in every direction. A surge of destruction. From Izumi's mouths, torrents of electricity surged, cascading in massive bolts that illuminated the clouded sky. They struck the ground and sea alike, igniting fires, shattering rock, and sending shockwaves that toppled nearby buildings. Kong and Gojira braced themselves against the immense force. Kong's mechanical arms sparked and hissed as it absorbed the relentless electrical assault, while Gojira's scales steamed under the sizzling energy. The titans were battered but resolute. The battlefield transformed. The storm ripped the battlefield apart, fracturing the earth beneath their feet, churning the waters of the Potomac into frothing torrents. Lightning bolts leapt across the skyline, illuminating the ruined monuments and shattered glass. Through the howling gale, Kong's roar cut through, a defiant challenge, and Gojira's nuclear glow flared brighter, a beacon of hope amid the fury. The tension of the moment. For a brief, suspended heartbeat, all combatants locked eyes. Izumi, wild and untamed, the living storm incarnate, poised to crush her adversaries beneath her wrath. Kong and Gojira, battered but unyielding, united by desperation and strength. The storm was not just a weapon, it was a message that Izumi's power was far beyond mere physical strength. It was elemental, primordial, and terrifying. The battle is far from over. And as lightning arced around Izumi's form, preparing to strike once more, the struggle between the titans surged toward an apocalyptic crescendo. Neither side would yield. The war for the world's fate had only just begun. The skies above Washington, D.C. had become a roiling cauldron of chaos. The lightning storm Izumi had summoned pulsed with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural. As massive bolts cracked through the thick, roiling clouds, they struck the earth, the water, and the shattered remnants of buildings with devastating power. But far from being harmed, Izumi thrived. Feeding the storm. Izumi's many eyes glowed brighter with every crack of thunder, every flash of lightning. Her heads lifted high, mouths open wide, drawing in the electric fury as if inhaling the very essence of the storm. The raw energy coursed along her black, armored scales like rivers of molten light, invigorating her body. The electrical storm, once a weapon aimed at her enemies, now became her source of strength, a divine lightning rod feeding her regeneration and amplifying her already terrifying power. Where Kong's mechanical arms sparked and hissed under the storm's pressure, Izumi's form shimmered with renewed vitality. Wounds that moments before had marred her obsidian skin melted away in flashes of purple-white energy. Flesh knit itself back with unnatural speed, bone reformed, and muscle tightened. The storm was not just a battle advantage, it was life itself for Izumi. Kong and Gojira stagger. Kong's powerful roars echoed across the battlefield, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice now. His strikes, once relentless and devastating, began to falter against Izumi's rejuvenated form. Gojira's eyes narrowed, the faint blue glow from his nuclear core flickering uncertainly. His massive tail slammed against the broken earth, sending up showers of debris, but each hit seemed to be absorbed or shrugged off by Izumi's crackling scales. The tide was turning, rapidly. A surge of brutality. Izumi's three heads snapped and lashed out with terrifying speed. Two of her mouths clamped onto Kong's mechanical arm, crunching metal with teeth like jagged obsidian blades. Kong howled, wrenching free, but the damage was done. The augment was already sparking dangerously. With a WHP of her muscular tail, Izumi sent Kong sprawling, his movements slowed and hampered. Her middle head released a focused blast of gravity lightning, striking Gojira square in the chest. The nuclear titan crashed into a shattered monument, sending clouds of dust and debris high into the stormy air. The storm amplifies. The electrical tempest intensified with Izumi as its heart. The very clouds seemed alive, dancing with arcs of energy that fed her in a vicious feedback loop. Bolts slammed down in synchronized fury, some striking the earth. Around her foes, others streaming directly into her. Kong gritted his teeth, struggling to rally as the storm raged around him, but even his immense willpower seemed to wane in the face of Izumi's elemental onslaught. Gojira, battered and exhausted, tried to shake off the brutal lightning, but each surge of power that flowed into Izumi left him weaker, his energy siphoned away into the monstrous titan who now seemed unstoppable. Monarch's horror. From the command center, Monarch's analysts watched in stunned silence. The energy readings spiked to unprecedented levels as Izumi absorbed the storm's full fury. "We underestimated her," one officer muttered. "She's not just a force of nature, she is nature." Another voice cracked with fear. "If she keeps regenerating like this, Kong and Gojira won't last long." All for one's dark satisfaction. Far away, in the shadowy depths of his hidden lair, all for one's cold smile widened as he observed the scene unfold through his surveillance. "She grows stronger," he murmured, eyes gleaming with madness and dark delight. "The extinction level event approaches, and the world will bow before her storm." Turning point. Kong, panting and wounded, exchanged a glance with Gojira. The fight was far from over, but their window was closing fast. Izumi, empowered by the storm she commanded, was no longer just a physical threat. She was an elemental god of destruction, unstoppable and terrifying. The battle for the future of the world was entering its most desperate phase yet, and the storm was far from over. A thunderous end. The storm was a living thing now, vast, eternal, and furious. Black clouds swirled over the shattered ruins of Washington, D.C., crackling with arcs of cosmic energy. The skies pulsed with purple and white light, each burst brighter than the last. And at its very center stood Izumi, the Titan Queen, haloed by lightning, her triple heads hissing with bloodlust. Kong, wounded and worn, staggered forward, his mechanical arm dragging behind him, cracked and sparking. His fur was scorched, matted with BLD and ash. Yet his eyes were defiant, always defiant. He had bought Gojira time. That was the plan. But time was something Izumi would not give freely. Her heads twisted in sync, watching Kong with cold calculation. Then, in a blur of speed unnatural for a creature her size, she surged forward. The ground shook with her sprint. Lightning surged across her back. Kong roared and swung his arm in a wide arc, aiming for her central head. It never landed. Izumi's left and right heads snapped forward like coiled vipers. One latched onto Kong's chest, the other to his shoulder. He roared in pain and fury, a sound of final defiance, before the middle head lunged down and bit into his throat. The scream caught in his lungs. With a sickening crack, she tore upward, muscle and bone snapping apart. BLD poured like rain as the king of Skull Island was lifted from the earth, flailing for breath, for freedom, for life. Izumi slammed him down with such force that the earth cracked beneath them. A final, shallow breath. Then silence. Kong, the last titan of man's making, was dead. Gojira's weak struggle. Across the battlefield, Gojira groaned and stirred. The power Mothra had gifted him had been spent in the earlier clash. His flesh still burned with residual nuclear energy, but it wasn't enough. He saw Kong fall, saw his only living ally struck down, and rage burned in his chest like a dying star. But he could not stand. Not yet. Not now. The hollow earth shakes. Miles below the surface of the world, where the hollow earth pulsed with ancient life and forgotten energy, the silence was broken by a trembling quake. Then came the sound, soft, distant, but rising, the slow grind of frost spreading across stone. A cavern lit by pale blue crystals fractured as a colossal form stepped forward, her body cloaked in glacial mist, her wings wrapped tightly around her massive, serpentine frame. Her scales shimmered with a cold that defied the heat of the earth. Shimo, the winter leviathan, opened her ancient eyes. The call had reached her. The balance had broken. Her time had come. With a mighty flap of her wings, she soared upward, frost trailing behind her, freezing molten rivers in her wake. Hollow earth split open, a column of ice erupting through the surface as Shimo emerged, her body illuminated by the moonlight cutting through the storm clouds over DC. She had arrived. And with her, winter. Izumi turns. High above the battlefield, Izumi stood victorious. The body of Kong lay limp beneath her feet, still smoldering. Her wings beat once, twice, stirring a vortex of ash and dust. And then she felt it. A presence. Cold, ancient, opposing. All three of her heads turned to the south, toward the blinding blue fissure erupting from the hollow earth. Shimo rose from the crater like a goddess of frost, her wings unfurling with regal grandeur. Snowflakes began to fall, impossible, given the inferno and storm around them, but fall they did, trailing off her like dying stars. Monarch satellites immediately pinged the change. New emergence detected, a technician shouted. Designation confirmed, Shimo. She's come above ground, Serizawa whispered in awe. After all these years. 3 titans stand, 1 reigns. Gojira groaned once more, raising his head toward the icy figure now facing down the storm-wrapped beast. Izumi hissed with amusement, not fear. Her wings flared out in challenge, crackling with residual electricity. Lay behind her. Gojira crawled to her right. And before her, Shimo hovered in stillness like a looming glacier. The battlefield had shifted. The queen had executed the Ape King. But the Winter Queen had arrived, and Izumi's throne was no longer unchallenged. Cold meets cataclysm. The air around Washington, D.C. froze over in mere moments. The apocalyptic electrical storm that surrounded Izumi now mixed with a new force, A creeping, unnatural cold that rolled in with glacial majesty. Skyscrapers reduced to skeletons of concrete and steel cracked and crumbled under the sudden temperature shift. Clouds that once flashed with purple lightning darkened and slowed, heavy with snow. From the fissure in the earth, Shimo emerged in full. She was vast, elegant, monstrous. Her wings spanned like Arctic mantles of jagged, frost-encrusted membrane. Her body was a serpentine mountain of armored scales, each one glimmering with the sheen of eternal ice. Her eyes, twin orbs of pale winter blue, stared at Izumi with neither hatred nor fury, but judgment. Izumi roared, a deafening triple-headed shriek that tore through the clouds. It echoed with the pride of a creature who had just killed a king and burned 2 gods. Her wings beat the air once, creating a shockwave of static-charged wind. Shimo answered not with sound, but action. The first strike was swift, a blast of sub-zero frost breath erupting from her gaping maw, sweeping toward Izumi with the force of a hurricane. Trees, ruins, and the corpses of fallen titans turned to brittle crystal in its path. But Izumi was faster. She burst into motion, wings flashing with sparks as she shot into the sky, narrowly avoiding the glacial torrent. Her left head twisted down and countered with an arcing bolt of lightning that struck Shimo's left wing. The winter leviathan grunted but held steady, wings beating as she rose higher into the sky. The 2 titans met midair like meteors. And Izumi dominated. Storm over ice. Shimo attempted another frost burst, this time aiming to slow Izumi's wings, but Izumi's right head bit into her neck before it could form. Sparks of stored energy surged into Shimo's body, disrupting her focus. Then came the claws. Izumi's talons tore into Shimo's scales, sending shards of ice and glimmering armor spiraling through the air. The younger titan reeled, trying to push Izumi away with a pulse of frigid wind, but Izumi's 3 heads lunged in tandem, one biting her wing joint, another snapping at her throat, and the third blasting raw electricity into her face. The cry Shimo let out was one of pain, ancient, unearthly, and anguished. Monarch watched in horror. "She's overwhelming Shimo," someone shouted in disbelief. "She's faster, stronger, she's toying with her." A god's last breath. In the distance, Gojira watched. He lay among the rubble, body scorched, muscles twitching with half-spent nuclear power. The glow beneath his dorsal plates had dulled, pulsing in slow, labored intervals like a dying heart. Yet his eyes, narrowed and burning, never left the sky. He saw Kong's body, broken and discarded. He saw Mothra's sacrifice wasted. And he saw Shimo, the one beacon of balance left, faltering. A deep rumble escaped his throat as he began to rise. Not fully. Not yet. But his claws dug into the earth. His breath turned harsh, guttural. He inhaled, long and slow, drawing in the ambient radiation from Izumi's storm and the fallout of the earlier battle. The pulse at his back grew brighter, slowly. Final. The fight turns bloodied. Izumi slammed Shimo into the side of a toppled skyscraper, her wings wrapped around her prey like a constricting serpent. Shimo tried to break free, her body glowing faintly blue as she charged another ice pulse. But Izumi sank her middle head's fangs deep into the base of her skull, discharging a paralyzing surge of electricity. The ground cracked beneath the force of their impact. Ice shattered. The building crumbled into frozen rubble. Izumi roared in triumph, tossing Shimo aside like refuse. The frost titan lay dazed, her wings broken, her breath uneven. Ice formed reflexively across her scales, trying to mend what damage it could, but she was faltering. Above, Izumi hovered, lightning streaming from her wings, her 3 heads glaring down like the eyes of an angry god. Her shriek of Demps split the skies once more. And in that moment, with Mothra gone, Kong dead, and Shimo crippled, Izumi reigned supreme. But deep below, a low, thunderous thrum began to rise. Gojira was not done. The roar heard across the world. Izumi stood victorious atop a throne of devastation. The twisted remains of Washington, D.C. lay crushed beneath her claws. The sky churned in violent spirals of black and violet clouds, arcing with pulses of electricity born from Izumi's very essence. Her 3 heads rose high, eyes glowing like stars gone mad, and she roared, a titanic cry of domination that shook the shattered earth and silenced the last sounds of resistance. Her triumph was complete. Shimo lay broken and bloodied in a frozen crater. Kong's mangled corpse smoldered behind a wreck of concrete and steel. Mothra's sacrifice was undone. Humanity was silent. Monarch's command centers reduced to whispers, prayers, and silent tears. Izumi turned, her middle head staring skyward while the other 2 scanned the ruins, daring anything or anyone to challenge her rule. And then the ground shook. Not like before, not from her landing, not from destruction. This was different. A tremor that grew in intensity, rhythmically pounding like the drums of war. Izumi paused. From behind a scorched federal monument, a towering, molten silhouette emerged. Gajiraa. Resurgence of the king. He was limping. His plates were cracked, his tail dragging slightly. Blackened scars covered his body from earlier wounds, claw marks, electrical burns, even patches of frozen tissue from Shimo's cryo-attacks. But his eyes, they burned with nuclear rage. Each footstep left scorched, molten prints in the earth. His dorsal fins glowed a furious burning orange, the nuclear power within him barely contained. His breath was heavy, seething, his chest rising and falling with every slow step. Izumi's left head hissed. Her center head narrowed its eyes. Her right head blinked. Then, Gajiraa charged. The force of his motion cracked the pavement beneath him. His tail whipped back, stabilizing his massive bulk as he gathered all his remaining energy into one furious burst of motion. Izumi's wings flared, too late. Like a freight train of molten fury, Gajiraa slammed into her. The titans clash again. The impact sent Izumi reeling, all 3 heads letting out staggered screeches as her body was lifted off the ground and thrown through a line of ruined buildings. Concrete and steel exploded into dust and ash as she tumbled, wings flailing, limbs struggling to find purchase. She smashed into the remains of the Capitol dome, pulverizing it into fragments beneath her immense bulk. Before she could rise, Gajiraa was on her. He lunged, jaws clamping around her left shoulder, crushing bone and sinew. Izumi shrieked and retaliated, her center head twisting to sink its fangs into Gajira's neck, but he ignored the pain, pressing his full weight onto her. A pulse of nuclear heat burst from his body, enveloping Izumi in a cone of atomic fire. Her flesh sizzled, scales peeling off under the force. One of her wings twitched erratically, still singed from his earlier blast. But she was not defenseless. Izumi's right claw slashed across Gajira's chest, carving deep into his hide. Her tail whipped around, striking his side and forcing him off. As he stumbled, she launched upward, wings flaring violently, throwing him back with a shockwave of wind and lightning. They circled now, predator and predator, breathing hard, bleeding, refusing to fall. The storm reignites. Izumi hovered, electricity coursing from her talons and heads in cascading arcs of unnatural lightning. Her wounds healed slowly, assisted by the electric storm overhead, clouds crackling with power that she hungrily fed upon. Below, Gajiraa snarled. He too was wounded, his energy flickering like a dying sun. But his resolve only deepened. His eyes locked onto hers. There would be no retreat. No yielding. Not while the earth still turned. They both roared, voices of gods caught in a storm of fury. And then, they charged once more. The final round had begun. The skies above Washington, D.C. remained a roiling chaos of thunder and jagged lightning, the remnants of Izumi's storm swirling with a desperate fury. But the storm's energy, once so fiercely at her command, now seemed to waver, as if the very air itself was shifting in favor of the opposing force below. Gajiraa, battered and worn, pressed forward through the devastation with a predatory resilience that few could comprehend. Every labored breath steamed in the cool air as he locked his glowing, burning eyes onto Izumi, who circled above him like an apex predator desperate to maintain her reign. Their battle was no longer the straightforward domination Izumi had wielded with terrifying ease. The king of the monsters had found a new strength, a slow-burning, indomitable power rekindled from the ashes of defeat. Gojira's resurgence. With a guttural growl, Gojira's dorsal plates flared an intense orange red, a nuclear furnace stoked to near boiling point. The legendary burning form had awakened fully within him, the lethal heat and energy crackling from his every scale radiating with overwhelming force. Izumi's keen eyes narrowed. The storm that fed her waned as the oppressive heat rising from the ground clashed against the cooling clouds. Lightning flickered and sputtered, as if reluctant to continue. Gojira surged forward, his tail whipping through the ruined cityscape and sending chunks of shattered concrete flying like deadly missiles. He closed the distance with terrifying speed, jaws snapping inches from Izumi's multi-headed visage. Izumi dodged deftly, her agility and multiple limbs allowing her to evade Gojira's snapping jaws with expert precision. But the king was relentless, his blows heavier, his strikes more precise. Each collision thundered across the desolate landscape like the drums of war. The battle intensifies. Izumi responded with her own brutal assault. Two of her heads lunged simultaneously, snapping and clawing with venomous intent. Her claws raked across Gojira's flank, tearing deep gouges that smoldered with raw energy. But Gojira's resilience was staggering. He grunted, shaking off the pain, and retaliated with a devastating atomic breath. The concentrated beam of searing radiation sliced through the air, forcing Izumi to dive through the veil of searing heat. The ground itself cracked and melted beneath the blast. Yet Izumi emerged, her scales smoking but intact. Her fury only grew. Gathering strength from the fading storm clouds, she unleashed a thunderous roar, a challenge meant to shake the very foundations of the earth. Gojira's counterstrike. But this time, it was Gojira who responded with a roar that echoed deeper, resonating with the primal power of millennia. Channeling every ounce of his nuclear energy, he emitted a nuclear pulse, a radiant shockwave that surged outward, knocking Izumi back with explosive force. The blast burned into her wings, singeing the delicate membranes and disrupting her balance mid-flight. For a moment, Izumi faltered, her three heads twisting in shock and rage. Seizing the opportunity, Gojira charged. His massive jaws clamped down on one of Izumi's legs, crushing bone and muscle as she screamed in fury and pain. She retaliated with a savage bite to his neck, but Gojira's armor-like hide absorbed much of the damage. With a mighty heave, Gojira tossed her like a rag doll into a crumbling skyscraper, the building shuddering and collapsing from the force of impact. Shifting momentum. As Izumi struggled to rise, Gojira loomed over her, tail lashing the debris in warning. The tides had turned. Monarch's observers, hidden in distant bunkers, gasped in disbelief. All systems reporting, the king is winning. Izumi's energy levels are dropping rapidly, one commander whispered, disbelief clear in his voice. Across the globe, all for one sinister smile faded. His prized weapon, the Alpha Titan, was beginning to falter. A battle of attrition. Izumi's regeneration, once seemingly inexhaustible, was faltering under the sustained onslaught. The electricity she so deftly wielded was weakening, her connection to the storm breaking apart as the sun pierced through the dissipating clouds. Gojira pressed his advantage, his blows growing stronger, his movements surer. Each strike chipped away at Izumi's defenses, her once impenetrable multi-headed form now marked with scorched flesh, torn scales, and jagged wounds. But Izumi was far from defeated. Her middle head growled with defiance, channeling the last reserves of her power into a dazzling arc of lightning that crackled between her claws. She charged. The battle was far from over. The clash continues. They collided again, titans locked in an epic struggle of power and will. Each blow, each roar, a testament to their unyielding determination to claim the earth as their own. The storm around them flickered and died, leaving only the sound of thunderous combat, the crackle of energy, and the echoes of a battle that would shape the fate of the world. The relentless clash of titans raged on, but beneath Izumi's fierce exterior, an unsettling truth began to reveal itself. Her boundless fury was draining, her formidable energy reserves waning against the indomitable king of monsters. Every strike she launched now carried a fraction less force. Every roar lost a note of its terrible might. The once swirling tempest of lightning that encircled her had diminished to a flicker of sporadic sparks, the storm clouds above thinning as if retreating in surrender. The crackling electricity that had fed her regeneration and sharpened her attacks was slipping away, leaving her more vulnerable with each passing moment. Gojira's eyes glowed with renewed vigor, fiery and unyielding. With each hit he landed, he seemed to draw more strength from the battle, feeding off Izumi's faltering power like a dark, nuclear furnace stoking itself anew. His movements grew more fluid and confident, no longer the desperate lunges of a wounded giant but the calculated precision of a battle-hardened predator. The weight of fatigue. Izumi's multiple heads darted and snapped, but her reaction slowed. The biting teeth that had once sunk fiercely into Gojira's scales now barely grazed his thick hide. Her limbs trembled under the strain of maintaining flight and balance, wings beating with growing exhaustion. The searing pain from the nuclear pulse had long since settled into burning wounds, especially on her delicate wing membranes. Each flap became more laborious, the elegant grace of her aerial maneuvers giving way to jerky, desperate motions. Her tail, once a WHP of devastating power, now lagged behind in sluggish arcs. Her mind raced in turmoil, pride and rage warring against the undeniable truth that she was losing ground. Gojira's crushing assault. Sensing her weakness, Gojira pressed the advantage mercilessly. He lunged forward with a brutal swipe of his claw, tearing into Izumi's armored flank and eliciting a guttural scream that echoed across the broken cityscape. The shock of pain momentarily paralyzed her as the jagged wounds sizzled with radioactive heat. Before she could recover, Gojira's massive tail swept through the air, striking her with the force of a wrecking ball. Izumi was sent hurtling into the shattered ruins of a government building, concrete and steel crumbling beneath her crashing form. Staggering to her feet, she fought to steady her breathing, her eyes flickering with fading defiance. But Gojira was relentless. With calculated ferocity, he seized her again, jaws clamping down on one of her necks. Izumi thrashed, struggling to break free, but the crushing pressure began to sap the last reserves of her strength. The dimming storm. Izumi tried to summon the storm once more, willing the skies to obey her command. But the lightning that had been her greatest ally was nearly gone. The charged energy in the atmosphere dissipated, leaving behind only faint, reluctant sparks. Her roar, once a deafening challenge that shook mountains and stirred the seas, now cracked and splintered as she gasped for breath. The storm that had swirled fiercely around her, extending 7 miles in every direction, shrank rapidly, retreating as if conceding defeat. A glimmer of desperation. Cornered and drained, Izumi's movements grew desperate. With a burst of adrenaline, she lashed out, striking Gojira's snout with all the force she could muster. The king recoiled but did not falter. His eyes burned brighter, a blazing inferno of nuclear power ignited within him, fueled by the battle's escalating stakes. Izumi's gaze faltered as a heavy weariness seeped into her bones. The towering alpha she had once been, the embodiment of elemental fury, was slipping away beneath the weight of exhaustion and relentless assault. Monarch's silent alarm. Across the command centers, Monarch operatives watched in stunned silence. Her energy is dropping faster than anticipated, one analyst reported, voice edged with disbelief and fear. If this continues, Izumi won't last much longer. On a secure feed, All for One's dark eyes narrowed, calculating rapidly. An extinction-level event, but even the mightiest can falter, he mused. His grip tightened, the stakes rising as his weapon's fate teetered precariously. The battle's grim reality. Izumi stumbled, wings dragging, scales cracked and scorched, breaths shallow. The tide had turned. The Alpha's reign was faltering under the might of the king. And the world watched, breathless, as the balance of power shifted beneath storm-dark skies. Just as Gojira tightened his crushing grip around Izumi's weakened form, preparing to deliver the final, devastating blow, a sudden and violent force slammed into him from the side. Roden's massive, blazing wings unfurled with fiery intensity as he barreled into Gojira with the force of a volcanic eruption. The impact was cataclysmic, a shoulder check so brutal that it knocked Gojira off balance, staggering the king of monsters mid-assault. Scales scraped and cracked beneath the fierce collision, shockwaves rippling through the devastated cityscape below. The air roared with the sound of flapping wings and the ground trembled beneath the Titan's titanic clash. Gojira's glowing eyes flickered in surprise, his fierce snarl turning into a guttural roar of irritation and pain. He staggered backwards, momentarily stunned by the sheer unexpectedness of the attack. Roden's burning feathers shimmered as he hovered, wings beating fiercely to maintain altitude, poised to strike again. Izumi's last chance. Seizing the precious moment granted by Roden's intervention, Izumi's remaining head surged with renewed energy and predatory focus. Though battered and exhausted, her eyes burned with a desperate ferocity that no exhaustion could quench. With a powerful, coordinated motion, two of her heads lashed out, sinking razor-sharp teeth deep into Gojira's neck and side, the very places she had targeted before. Her fangs pierced through thick, radioactive scales, biting into the muscle and sinew beneath. A final head opened wide, unleashing a concentrated gravity beam that blasted into Gojira's chest with explosive force. Gojira gasped, a sound of agony and shock, as the beam tore through him, disrupting the nuclear energy pulsing inside. The crushing bite and searing beam sapped every ounce of the king's power, draining his life force in a terrifying, unnatural siphon. The draining of a titan. Monarch's control rooms fell silent, the screens flickering in disbelief. This is impossible, a scientist whispered. She's draining him. Completely. The king's energy is collapsing. All for One's lips curled into a rare, grim smile, watching from his hidden vantage. The Alpha extinguishes the king himself, he murmured, a dark satisfaction creeping through his voice. A predator that consumes even the mightiest. On the battlefield, Gojira's massive frame began to dim, his radiant glow fading, his immense power draining away like a dying star collapsing into darkness. His legs weakened, and the mighty tail that had swept cities aside now dragged limply behind him. Izumi's grip tightened, her energy siphoning unstoppable and absolute. The last embers of Gojira's strength flickered and died. Roden's fierce assault. Roden, wings blazing with volcanic fire, kept Gojira off balance, relentlessly attacking to prevent any counterattack. His furious assaults kept the king's focus divided, buying Izumi crucial seconds to complete the draining. The skies darkened, lightning crackling again around Izumi, feeding off her savage triumph. Her wings flared, scales shining with renewed luster as the storm's power surged into her veins. The fall of the king. At last, with a final shudder and a fading roar, Gojira's massive body slumped limp, completely drained of his nuclear might. He collapsed onto the ruined streets of Washington, D.C., defeated and powerless. Izumi, breathing heavily but unbroken, released her hold, her eyes scanning the battlefield with an unyielding hunger for depths. Her roar, deep and triumphant, echoed once more, resonating through the shattered city, a chilling declaration of supremacy. Monarch's horrified realization. Back in the command center, the Monarch teams stared in stunned silence. "He's done," one said, voice barely audible over the ringing silence. "Gojira, he's truly finished." But beneath the shock, a cold dread settled. "What now?" another whispered. "Izumi's just drained the king of monsters completely. There's nothing left to stop her." All for One's dark vision. Watching the battlefield, All for One's mind churned. An extinction-level event indeed, he thought grimly. With Gojira weakened, and Izumi at full power, humanity stands on the brink. But the game is far from over. His eyes gleamed as he prepared the next move in a shadowy, long-brewing plan. The air trembled with the raw intensity of Izumi's roar, a thunderous, primal sound that rippled across the broken skyline of Washington, D.C. Her three heads lifted skyward, each emitting a piercing, guttural call that echoed through the heavens and across the seas. The sound was unlike any roar heard before, a deep, resonating fury infused with unchallenged depths, reverberating in a mighty storm of rolling thunder and crackling electricity. This was not just a cry of victory. It was a declaration of supremacy, a challenge cast down from the highest throne of existence. Her voice cascaded across the globe, the storm swirling violently around her in a 7-mile radius, lightning dancing like ethereal serpents amid thunderclouds. The air itself seemed to bend, charged with raw, uncontrollable power. The arrival of the Titans. From every corner of the earth, the response was immediate. One by one, colossal silhouettes emerged through the gathering storms. The other Titans, sensing the Alpha's call, arrived, massive forms breaching oceans, tearing through skies, and shattering mountains with every step. Gojira's defeat and Izumi's overwhelming presence had shattered their chains of hesitation, replacing it with an instinctive submission to the Alpha's unyielding power. Roden, still blazing with the aftermath of his assault, lowered his burning wings in solemn acknowledgement. Shimo, barely clinging to life, staggered forward, his monstrous form weakened, wounds oozing and breath shallow, but his gaze bowed nonetheless. Silent and somber, the Titans encircled Izumi, each massive form dwarfed by her sheer presence yet moved by a profound recognition of authority. One by one, they lowered their heads and knelt in SBM. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their homage. Monarch's horror. Inside Monarch's command center, the atmosphere shifted to palpable terror. The analysts stared blankly at their screens, capturing the overwhelming procession of the Titans paying obeisance to Izumi. "She's the Alpha," whispered one scientist, voice trembling. "They're bowing to her." "Every one of them," another added, "even Roden, despite everything. Shimo's barely alive, and Kong and Mothra, both dead. We have no hope." The realization settled like a stone in their stomachs. Monarch's commander gripped the console with white-knuckled hands. "We are absolutely F," he muttered under his breath. All for One's dark triumph. Far from Monarch's desperation, All for One observed the spectacle with cold, calculating eyes. His lips curled into a grim smile, devoid of joy but rich with the satisfaction of inevitability. "An extinction-level event indeed," he mused quietly. "She embodies the end of humanity's dominion, the harbinger of the new order. The old kings have fallen, and the true Alpha reigns supreme." He rose from the shadows of his lair, already plotting the next move, knowing full well that the world was tilting irreversibly toward chaos and ruin. Izumi's dominion. On the battlefield, Izumi's roar faded into a low, menacing growl. Her eyes glowed with lightning, muscles tensed and pulsing as the storm around her thrummed in synchrony. She was no longer just a creature of power, she was the embodiment of nature's wrath, the apex predator crowned in electric fury. She raised a clawed limb, signaling the Titans to rise, their SBMs now a testament to her unstoppable rise. The earth beneath her feet cracked and shook as the balance of the world irrevocably shifted. The dawn of a new era. Mothra's final sacrifice, Kong's last stand, and Shimo's faltering strength had all been futile barriers against the overwhelming force of Izumi's emergence. Now, with the Titans united under her command, the old world order lay in ruins. Monarch and All for One alike understood one undeniable truth. Humanity's reign was over. A new epoch had begun, one ruled by the Alpha, Izumi, the living storm, the indomitable force of nature, and the end of all things. 3 centuries had passed. The last echoes of human civilization had long since faded into dust, steel monuments overtaken by creeping vines, great cities reclaimed by oceans and forests, and the once vibrant web of human achievement reduced to hollow ruins buried beneath time. There were no more machines, no more wars of men, no more voices to cry out against the dying of their age. Earth was no longer theirs. This was the Titan world now. Nature, unshackled from the cage of industry, had surged forth with unrelenting vigor. Towering forests spanned across once barren highways. Coral reefs consumed sunken cities. Animals, those that had survived the Great Collapse, thrived in balance beneath the protective presence of their new gods. And high above it all, in the very heart of the world, stood Izumi. She had not aged. Time bent around her, refused to touch her. Her flesh still crackled with living electricity, her body larger now, more refined, more regal. 3 heads crowned her like a deity of judgment and fury. Her wings, reforged by centuries of storms and regeneration, stretched wider than ever, etched with scars and power from ancient battles that had long passed into legend. Izumi was not simply a queen. She was a goddess. The other titans worshipped her in eternal reverence. Gojira's skeleton, drained and preserved by the energy she absorbed, rested like a monument within the deepest crater of what had once been Washington, D.C., now a basin overflowing with wild rivers and jungle. His death marked the end of resistance. Roden's lineage soared in burning winds, circling her throne, never daring to rise above her. The children of Behemoth carved valleys as they lumbered across continents, their paths carefully guided by her unseen will. Even Shimo's icy remnants still pulsed with life, entombed beneath the polar crown of the world, untouched and left as a reminder of the old war. They moved with purpose, not as beasts, but as instruments of balance. Their roars were not of chaos, but of Diespin, heralding the order Izumi had forged in the absence of mankind. Her rule was not kind, but it was just a balance in the true, terrible form of nature. The strong thrived, the weak endured, and all things obeyed the rhythm of the earth under her watchful gaze. The skies wept thunder. The seas whispered her name. The mountains bowed with every tremor of her colossal steps. Where once the world burned with humanity's hubris, now it pulsed with the ancient, sacred truth. This world belongs to the Titans. And above them all, watching, ever still, ever mighty, stood Izumi, the eternal queen. The last god. The first sovereign. The storm that never died. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Female Deku Was Golden Tyrant? We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Random Bullshit 9 for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on Wattpad for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you soon in the next video.